How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today I have the pleasure of talking to Jim Zub. How are you, sir?
Hey man, I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Yeah,
A little cold, but
awesome.
it's getting warmer. We got our heating unit fixed, so that's good. I
Awesome.
had the pleasure of interviewing you when you were in Kentucky,
That was
Lexington
in
Comic Con.
March.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was right before Conan launched, and
Well,
you
actually,
gave me a little.
Conan launched in the summer. Yeah, Conan launched in August, but we were hyping up for Free
It was a
Comic
free
Book Day,
comic
which
book
was
day.
coming
That
up. That's
yeah.
right.
So
That's right. Yeah.
you gave me a small glance as to what was coming, and I was really excited. And oh my gosh, I'm still excited.
It
The
has
thing,
been so huge. It's been crazy. The Conan launch last summer was massive, and we've just kept that momentum going. It's been really, really cool. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm a big fan. So now I have a little bit of longer time with you, so we can dive a little
Mhm.
deeper into Conan and all the other works that you've
That'd be
done.
awesome. And it's appropriate. Today is Robert E. Howard's birthday, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, actually. So,
Oh
yeah.
yes, I knew that. That was right.
No worries. I just sprung that one on you, just dropped it
You
right out
could
of the
be
mouth.
lying, and I would not be able to double
That's
check
right.
right now to see if that's true.
It's true. It's true. If I said that and it wasn't true, that would come back to haunt me,
That
obviously.
would be awful. That would be awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself, or for people that are not familiar with
Sure.
what are you currently working with? Because I'm a big fan of Wayward. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of your Champions and Thunderbolts, and we talked about that.
Thanks,
But what
man.
about people that aren't familiar with Jim Sub? What have
Sure.
you written?
So I'm Jim Zub. I'm a professional comic book writer. As soon as I say that, I get a big grin on my face because it's kind of been a dream job. It's been really, really wonderful. I live in Toronto, Canada, and I've worked on all kinds of different comic stuff that you may have read over the years. Everything from Avengers to Champions, Thunderbolts, lots and lots of sword and sorcery. Create our own books like Skullkickers and Wayward, but also things like the official Dungeons and Dragons comics, Pathfinder, Rick and Morty versus D&D, Samurai Jack, just all kinds of different stuff over the years. And then over the past few years, I've become really closely associated with what I jokingly call the Superman of sword and sorcery, Conan the Barbarian, the biggest, best original sword and sorcery hero. And
Joe?
so far, I'm the only writer who's written Conan at three different publishers. So I wrote a short story at Dark Horse,
Mm-hmm.
a mini series at Dark Horse with Gail Simone, crossover of Conan and Red Sonja. I did both issues of Savage Sword of Conan and the monthly series at Marvel, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm the flagship writer of Conan the Barbarian, being published by Titan in partnership with Heroic Signatures, which is the actual rights holders of all the Robert E. Howard character libraries. So it's cool. That's my big kind of project right now. I'm doing some other stuff here and there. Like last year, I had Murder World at Marvel, and I did the new Thunderbolt series that they had come out at the start
Mm-hmm.
of last year. I'm always doing Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but Conan is like that's where I'm at. Like I'm doing that monthly book. We're relaunching the Savage Sword of Conan
Saw that, yeah.
oversized black and white magazine next month. Our first trade paperback for the Conan monthly series also comes out next month, and I'm on that for the foreseeable future. We've got really crazy big plans. We've got an event that we're teeing up for the fall. We're back on Free Comic Book Day with another killer Conan issue that I know readers are going to freak out about, and it's awesome. It's like exactly where I want to be in terms of that character, and having my hand on the wheel for one of the coolest characters in pop culture. It's a joy. So
When
yeah.
did you and there's already some praises for you and
Oh,
some
cool.
lows and also some questions that I promise I will get to.
Oh,
Um,
sweet. Oh, Joe's awesome. That's great.
no, Joe's a good guy. Joe's a good
Yeah,
guy.
he's amazing.
Okay. Well, I don't know about amazing. He's a good guy. I've hung
Wow.
out,
Somewhere.
I've
What
hung out
is
with Joe a lot.
it's like
No, he's great. He's great. Actually, I'm gonna have him on the show again. I just love talking to him. When did you become the Conan fan? Like, is this something that just happened? That like, hey Jim,
I
you like
mean,
Dungeons and Dragons? How about
yeah,
Conan?
yeah. Actually, it was all my older brother kind of is the primordial soup for everything nerdy kind of in my life. So my brother's 4 years older than me. And
Mhm.
when you're like, 6 or 7 and they're like 11 or 12, like that is massive. You just want to be like your older sibling. And so Joe was into, science fiction and fantasy novels, and I gravitated to more of the fantasy stuff that he had on his shelves. We started playing Dungeons and Dragons together, and that became a huge bridge and kind of a vehicle for us spending time together. And then my older cousins as well. We would play games. We would play D&D and video games and all kinds of that stuff. And every so often, because they were a little bit older, they would be able to watch movies. So I remember seeing the Conan movie, when it came out. Not in the theaters. I would have been way, way too young. It was an R-rated film, but we saw it when it came on home video. My brother had been reading the Conan novels, and so I picked up those. And then we started picking up issues of the Conan comic book series, the monthly book, and Savage Sword in the magazine. And so it's hard for me to pin down which one came first because I don't quite remember. It was all kind of happening in a stew. I know D&D was very formative, and every time we saw a film, we would always frame it in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, like how much like D&D is this movie, TV show, book, whatever. How can we filter that through the world and the rules of D&D? And Conan is one of the original pulp stories, is a big influence on Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, the guys that made Dungeons and Dragons. And so you see a lot of that in there. And then the movie just felt like the most badass, sword and sorcery action kind of thing that we'd ever seen. And so it all just kind of stewed together. I was a pretty big fan, very, very young, not, of course, knowing, many years later, I'd get the chance to actually work on this stuff in any kind of a way, but it just all kind of stewed in there, all the D&D stuff, all that sword and sorcery stuff. And what I liked about it was, I gravitated to it even more than like Tolkien or Terry Brooks, or kind of what we would call high fantasy. Sword and sorcery, or what I jokingly kind of say low fantasy, is like this dark survivalist kind of fantasy. The magic is mysterious. You don't always understand the greater movements of kind of gods and devils and the greater powers of the world. You are generally not a hero of destiny. You're just going to get trodden underfoot, and things are happening for reasons you don't understand. And that felt very visceral to me, and it felt very kind of real to the D&D experience. I don't know if you've played Dungeons and Dragons,
but a couple of times I have.
Yeah, in like 5th edition. Life. Yeah, 5th edition D&D it's a much more kind of super powered version of it. Your characters can survive a lot, and you get to do a lot of cool stuff, and it's a wonderful game, and I love it. 1st edition D&D is very lethal, and it's very mysterious, and it's very strange. And so the pulpy stuff feels very much in line with it. The kind of bigger forces moving that you don't understand, and you're one sword stroke away from death at any particular moment. And so it really kind of struck a chord with me in that way. And it informed a lot of the kind of stories that I thought were cool, when the characters are surviving against these impossible odds, or on the run from dangers that they don't fully understand. That kind of mysterious pulpy aspect to it was really kind of core to me, and why those stories seem to hold on to me. The like mixture of horror and the mixture of mystery and action and survival. That's what good sword and sorcery and good fantasy feels like to me. And so I try and inject a bunch of that into my storytelling as well, whether or not I'm doing fantasy stuff. Like you see that all the time in a lot of the books that I've done over the years. Characters always on their back feet and on the run kind of stuff.
Who was the dungeon master when you were growing up?
My brother was most of the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was he ever look at you and was like, I should have been the storyteller?
I don't know. Well, you mean now, like with our careers?
Right. Now that you're writing,
he works in IT now, right? Like he's very much the computer systems guy, which is pretty ideal for old school D&D. A lot of the war gamers have got whether it's engineering or programming.
Yeah, you're right.
Stuff. And so Joe was very much caught up in the rule systems and how these things all worked. And the tough thing for us is that we didn't have a complete set of books, and it's not like nowadays where you can get stuff digitally at the drop of a hat. So we actually there are multiple versions of D&D. So we had basic D&D, some of the books, and we had advanced Dungeons and Dragons for some of the other books. And we were constantly just trying to figure out how the damn thing worked. And so we were always kind of messing things up. But, with all these RPGs, the important part is, are you having fun? Are you entertained? And man, oh man, we were always ludicrously entertained. And for me, it was a huge storytelling outlet, because when my turn came around, if I could say something to make my brother laugh, if I could entertain him and surprise him and engage him, that was like the first audience. That was like, oh, I can be funny. I can be witty. I can be, bold and do cool things, or kind of come up with stuff on the fly. It's a really good kind of, improv machine in that sense. And the storytelling aspect of it and the improv kind of aspect of it, and this like rolling, constantly changing narrative, that was something that really, really appealed to me. And then years later, we would also key into superhero stuff. We started collecting a lot of the Marvel comics. I was collecting Spider-Man and sometimes Captain America and the Hulk and Fantastic Four. My brother was buying all the mutant books. So like X-Men, X-Factor, all that kind of stuff. And we were pretty obsessed with the Marvel universe for quite a while. So the fact that I've been able to kind of channel both into a career is, I think it throws him off sometimes. Getting back to your original question.
I'm curious, as an older brother, like,
there's moments when I think we have these conversations and I'm trying to play up the fact, hey, this cool thing is happening. And I think my brother's got a little bit of that sort of like, don't get a big swelled head about it or whatever, and that,
well, that's our role as the big brothers.
That's the big brother, right? And so
you think you're some kind of writer now?
That's right. It's weird, right? Like, there was a time when I was doing one of the conventions here in Toronto, and my wife couldn't help me with this, when I was still manning my own like artist alley table and all that kind of thing. And normally my wife would help me load in with books and stuff. And I can't remember, she was out of town or something. And so I asked my brother to drive in and help me load in. And he just hung with me for like the whole day at the convention.
Yeah.
And all these people are coming up and meeting me and telling me how much they love the books and all this stuff. And I think it's not like he didn't know people read the thing, but it's like, it's different when someone's there talking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
The other one, really good memory. When my brother and I were really young, we would look through the old Dungeons and Dragons adventure books, and they would always, a lot of the adventures were actually built for conventions. They would do these things called game tournaments. And so you'd put together a specific dungeon and then you'd run it at a tournament, for example. And that's how they would play test them and try stuff out. And the biggest one is called Gen Con. I don't know if you know about Gen Con.
I'm very familiar with Gen Con. I have a lot of friends that go, yeah.
Yeah, it's in Indianapolis now, but it's called Gen Con because it was Lake Geneva. My brother and I would look through the old books and it would say, this was originally a tournament module at Gen Con 1982 or something. It would go, whoa, can you imagine ever going to Gen Con? Like ever, like just going and getting to meet those artists and authors who made the stuff that, blew the top of your head off when you were a kid. And, I started going to Gen Con for work, for professional stuff in 2004. And then I got my own booth at Gen Con that I share with two other authors, Howard Taylor and Tracy Hickman. And we've been going to Gen Con now since 2011, I think.
Okay.
Like every year we have a spot.
You have a booth.
So, okay. Yeah, we have a booth. And so Gen Con to me is like now so different because it's just a show that I go to and I get to hang out with these people.
Do you take a step back and say,
every so often I get to talk to somebody. I have a lot of funny stories. The first time I get to meet a lot of these kind of, to me, I think of as luminaries of the industry, and they're all very down to earth and easygoing and very chill. But my brother had never been. My brother's been to very
and you guys talked about going when you were
right.
kids. Okay.
And so when they did the 50th anniversary of Gen Con, and I can't remember what year it is, I'd have to track it back. I decided as sort of a birthday present for my brother, I would bring him to Gen Con. That would be his birthday present, is I would bring him to the big show. And, he doesn't just get to go. He's got an exhibitor badge. He gets to go before the show opens.
Yeah, this is exciting.
These industry dinners. He gets to show up before the doors open and wander around and decide what he wants to play or buy or all this kind of stuff. And so he had this like magical, crazy weekend where he got to hang out and meet all these people whose work he's known over the years. And then, he's also watching because Gen Con is a 4-day show. And so it's like every day it gets crazier and crazier, and we're selling books and I'm signing books, and we would finish the day and it was just nuts. I would be exhausted, and then we would go out for industry dinner stuff, and then usually there was some sort of a party or social event.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going back to the hotel. I'm exhausted. I'm like, I've got to keep going. Like, that's the job. And then the next morning we go for breakfast, and he's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm very tired. And he's like, well, maybe you should, like go in a little later. I'm like, no, we got to be there at open. That's people are expecting me there. I got to go.
Yeah.
And like, by the time we got to like the third day, he goes, this is a lot of work. And I think he had seen, understandably, you don't post on social media like, hey, we hauled crazy amount of boxes.
Right,
hey,
right.
This is, setup didn't go the way we hoped, and we just spent hundreds of dollars we weren't anticipating. And like, you always have the selfies and the look at us, we're having fun. And that's the Instagram, Facebook kind of convention experience, right? Like, here's me with the celebrity.
You sell that. That's the pitch.
Well, and it's the stuff that you want to remember. Right. Like, most people don't take a photo of like, this is hellish hard work, so.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good point. Like, a lot of people don't realize how much it takes to even.
And don't get me wrong, I love it, and I love meeting people, and I love having those interactions. But even just, it sounds weird, talking to people for like 8 hours, and they're coming up to you, and every few minutes, if it's busy, someone is meeting you for the first time, and their first impression of you is going to be dictated in that moment, right?
You're absolutely
you have to be as. It's still me, but you have to be like the best version of you possible, because in those 5 to 10 minute interaction where they meet you, they shake your hand, or they get a book signed, or they buy a book, they're going to decide what they think of you as an author, as a creator. They already were motivated to come meet you, but now if you don't meet that expectation, or if you come off, flip or as a jerk or whatever, literally they will just stop reading your work. They will just not be, or they will, especially.
Okay, I will say some people will, right? And
sure, I'm not saying everyone.
Yeah,
sure.
I've had some, unfortunately, when I was younger, I had bad interactions. My first time meeting some of these legends.
Oh man, and that's tough,
and
right?
It breaks your heart. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, if I ever get any, recognized out somewhere, I never want to be like that.
Sure, and then you just never know how things are going to roll. And so nowadays I'm much more easygoing about that stuff, in the sense that if I meet someone and it doesn't go well, I just think to myself, they probably had a bad burrito or something. Like, you just don't know what else is going on in their life. You know what I mean? And
absolutely. So you never know,
as much as possible. If you're at the table, if I'm sitting there, I've got to make that effort to be, again, the best version of me. Or, you're listening and you're paying attention and you're doing that thing. And then it's like the next person steps up, hit the reset button. We got to do it again and do it again and do it again. And so Joe really got a different view of kind of the convention experience and what that entails, and
from
what the job is. Like, that if you're there doing promotion and you're there kind of selling yourself and selling the work, that is part of that. It can take a lot out of you, and we finished up the weekend and it was a crazy good time. We had so much fun, and we're heading to the airport, and I'm all, pleased with myself because Joe's had this magical time or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're heading to the airport, getting ready to get on the plane. And I said, well, first one's free, buddy. Next one, you got to pay for yourself. I assume we'll see you next year. And he looks at me and he gives me this really weird look, and he goes, I don't think I'm coming back. And I was like, what? Really? And then he looks at me and he literally gets tears in his eyes, and he goes, it'll never be better than that.
Oh man.
And he's right. He had the ideal kind of convention experience where he had this just magical, amazing time.
Yeah.
And it's like, in some ways it's good to kind of package that away and go, that was a really cool experience. And maybe down the line he goes, but he doesn't become necessarily a lifer. It's different. I do this every single year. I've got a totally different perspective on it. Like San Diego Comic-Con is another one of those ones where people are like, I wish I could go to San Diego. And I think to myself, I've been to San Diego like 17 or 18 times, but it's different. It's work, and it's fun, and it's social, and it's like networking and all that.
Networking takes a lot out of you.
It does. But it becomes this fun thing too, where there's something weirdly magical about being at San Diego and hanging with people, and they're like, oh, we don't know where to go for dinner tonight. And you're like, I know a place, because that neighborhood, that area so well. And you're like, there's this little tucked away spot no one knows about. Let me take you there. And then if you get there and you can get a table and everyone's like, whoa, you really know your way around the city. You're like, well, this 7-block radius around the convention center, I know very well, but beyond that, not so much. But yeah, it's neat. It's neat, man.
I love hearing
always
these
a fun
stories,
ride.
and I will say before we start talking about the big guy,
Sure.
the every time I've gone to a con, even before interviewing you, I kind of check out Artist Alley, and I love seeing the creators, whether it's
Mhm.
New York Comic Con or a smaller convention. So I've seen you at cons a couple times. I think the last time you were
Okay.
talking, the last time I wanted to come and say hi, but I think you were talking to it was Sal from Comic.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
and I was like, well, they're talking. I'll just come by later, and then coming by later at New York Comic Con is like never because it's like,
Yeah.
that
Chaos.
was 5 hours ago, and I'm in the next like, bro, not gonna
Yeah.
happen. But what I was gonna say is like you do take your time with everybody that you meet. And you're always kind, and I
I
think
try to.
kind
Yeah,
goes.
nobody's perfect, but you always want to be like, I learned really well, honestly. So my second year of doing San Diego Comic-Con, there's this amazing guy. His name's Mark Asquith. He was the manager of the Silver Snail, which was the big comic book store in downtown Toronto. They're still around this day, but they're in a different neighborhood and stuff like that. But Mark's a really good dude. He used to be a TV producer. He did this show in the 90s called Prisoners of Gravity, which was this Canadian
Okay.
sci-fi show where he would interview comic book and literary, and sci-fi and fantasy authors and all this stuff. And just a crazy amount of talent. You would not believe the number of people he was able to get interviews with, because this is the early 90s. Like Neil Gaiman's not a thing in
Oh, right,
general
right.
pop culture, but he can talk to Neil for 2 hours and get all this amazing interview footage, or Stan Lee, or
Mhm.
he's got interview footage with Jack Kirby and all this kind of stuff. Mark knows everyone. That's the key point you need to take away here. And so it's he knows my independent work at that time. I was doing a web comic and just started getting my feet wet in terms of starting to do things in the industry. And he was always very nice, and he's super supportive of Canadian creators. And so there was a group of us, and he was like, do you want to go out for lunch today? There's going to be a group of us going out for lunch. Are you interested? And I'm like, sure. Who's going? And he's like, oh, Bruce Timm and Frank Cho and Scott Kurtz and Grant Morrison. And I was just like, what? Like this just
Whoa.
insane spread of creators.
Right.
And I was like, is there a room for me? And he's like, of course, Jim, you're one of us. And I was just like, haha, Mark, you're always so nice. That is not true, but thank you. And so he says, meet us at the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund booth. Grant's doing a signing, until noon, and then we're all going to head for lunch. We've got a, reservation at a place a few blocks away. I was like, amazing. So we show up, and they had forgotten to cap Grant's line. And so Grant Morrison's line is just stretching down the aisle and
I'm sure.
wrapping around.
Yeah.
And because they hadn't capped it, like his signing was supposed to end at 12, but there was just no way. And so Grant's talking to Mark and everyone. He's like, I'm sorry, guys, I can't come for lunch. I've got to sign. And I was pretty annoyed. I was like, I really wanted to meet Grant Morrison. And we're walking away from the convention center, and I'm being a little sulky and a little irritable. And Mark's like, what's wrong? And I said, like those guys got to be more patient. Like, Grant needs to eat, like that guy. And he goes, you don't care if Grant Morrison eats. You wanted to meet Grant Morrison. And I said, well, yes, that is true. And he goes, Jim, you don't understand. And he was like very pointed. He said, every one of those people waiting in line wanted to meet Grant Morrison as well. And they're going to wait there for however long it takes. And they're going to have a 30-second or a 2-minute interaction, and they will be a fan for life. And you will have lots of other opportunities to meet that man, but they probably won't. So suck it up and be cool, and hope that if you ever get to a point where you have a line and people want to line up for you, that you do right by every one of those people. And that stuck with me. That like branded into my brain.
That's some good advice.
Yeah. And so I always think of that when things are really crazy, you do plenty of conventions and signings that are dead. And if you do those several times, any kind of interest or excitement, you're like, well, this is better than, people not caring. So I'd rather have a line and be dealing with a lot of people and be exhausted than sitting there twiddling my thumbs. So, be thankful that that's the case rather than, the other. So that's the way I look at it.
I think that's some great advice too, because I've seen a lot of creators do that, like not go to the bathroom and stick around, and not all of them, of course.
Sure. And I think there's always a balancing act, like, and I get that, but there's this thing of, okay, I'm at the show, I'm at my table between these hours, I got to be on, like, I got to, focus and give people that attention, and let's talk about this stuff and let's have fun with it. So, because it's sort of the culmination of, you worked really hard on a project, you put all your time into it, you've been working quietly away, usually in isolation, and now finally you get to celebrate the end result of those efforts.
Conan.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Conan. Getting lots of praises from people in the chat, which is great, because Conan has been phenomenal.
Awesome.
So here's a couple of things I want to ask you, and then I'm going to get to some questions here.
Sure.
You've written Conan for 3 different companies. What differences are there, like, when writing for Dark Horse?
Dark Horse was a mini series and it was a co-writing gig. I wouldn't have had the chance to write Conan if it wouldn't have been for Gail Simone. She brought me in on that project because she knew I loved the character, and it was this really unique opportunity to have Conan and Red Sonja team up again for the first time in, I want to say, 15 or 16 years that the two characters had been in.
It's been a long time.
And so it was a really unique project. It was really fun. We had Dan Panosian ended up drawing the miniseries with Randy Green, and it was amazing. It was a really fun ride. And I thought, of course, that would be my only chance to ever write Conan. Weirdly enough, my first professional credit is also a Conan book. When I was working at the Udon studio, my summer job that became like 8 years working at the studio. My summer job was recoloring Conan reprints for the Chronicles of Conan Dark Horse release. So I think I colored like 5 or 6 Conan stories in that reprint release from 2003. And so my first professional kind of credit is amongst those colorists in that published book. I probably got it on the shelf behind me here.
You're talking about the Conan Chronicles, the recoloring of the Marvel comics?
Yeah.
Put out? Yeah.
Oh, I've got it somewhere here. I don't know where they're at.
That's really
somewhere
cool
on the shelf.
So, man, it's like Conan brings it all back together. I forgot that.
Yeah, Conan. So much Conan, man. And then this Conan Red Sonja miniseries. Then, at Marvel, when they got the rights to the character back to do the licensing deal that they had in, I want to say 2018, I think it was. I had just finished co-writing the Avengers No Surrender weekly with Mark Waid and Al Ewing, and it did really well. And there was extra bandwidth to do Avengers stuff because there was Avengers Infinity War and Endgame had come out back to back year after year. And so Tom Brevoort, our editor, asked us if we would do another Avengers story. And he brought the idea to us. He said, it hasn't been announced publicly yet, but Marvel's getting the rights to Conan back. We want Conan in this Avengers, event, which we ended up calling No Road Home. And my first reaction was like, oh, that's a terrible idea. Because I'm a purist. I love the sword and sorcery stuff, and the crossover stuff can be really kooky, and it can be fun. Don't get me wrong. The what if issue with Conan and Thor, I think, is really, really cool. Or Conan, what if Conan came to the modern era or whatever? Like, that stuff's neat as a one-off or kind of interesting. And so I had to kind of reframe my brain, because the way Tom put it to me, I said, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if fans are going to like it. And he goes, well, if we do it well, they'll like it, which is, that's true. And then he said, look, if you guys don't make good use of Conan, like, someone else will. This is a cool thing that we have that we can incorporate into the story. And then your ego kind of kicks into it, and you go, well, if someone else does it, they'll do a crappy job. So we got to do a good job, And so I wrote, most of the Conan parts in No Road Home. And at the end of it, we decided we were going to deposit Conan in the Savage Land. That seemed like a fun little piece. And then Jerry Jugan picked up on that, and he did Savage Avengers. And he kind of carried forward with Conan in the Marvel Universe. And Jason Aaron was writing the regular monthly book for Conan the Barbarian.
Mhm.
And so I was like, man, that was my last chance to write Conan. That was kind of fun. I got to work with Sean Isaac and a bunch of these artists who I love, and they drew a cool Conan, and that was cool. That was fun stuff. But I had these two things that were kind of in my brain. One was the fact that both times I'd written Conan, they were co-writing credits. And there's
Oh,
like a
okay.
weird kind of ego thing where you're like, are people going to assume that like which parts they don't know what I did? And second of all, neither of them, the crossover was obviously in the Hyborian Age, but with the Red Sonja stuff, there were different limitations, and we were telling this different kind of a crossover story. I didn't get to tell what I would think of as a pure kind of Conan story. Like in the Hyborian Age, he's the main character doing it all himself. How does that story function? And what do I think a good Conan story is? And so the editor of the Conan books at that time at Marvel was this guy, Mark Basso, and we'd worked together on several projects. He's wonderful. And so at New York Comic Con that fall, I pitched him and I said, I know you guys are doing Savage Sword as a full color anthology book with different creators rotating in and out. I just want to do one Conan story. I just want a solo written thing. I want to kind of drop the mic on what I think a good Conan story is, and just like classic, pulpy, violent, like intense. And he goes, pitch me. And so I sent him a pitch for this story that I'd had kind of jangling around in my head. And we ended up doing it as a 3-part story in Savage Sword, and it's called The Gambler. And that apparently, I heard later, really jumped out to the rights holders of Conan. They thought it was really good. They thought it was very much on point, very much in line with the kind of original pulp stories of Conan the Barbarian from Weird Tales, that it worked really well as a story anyone could pick up, but it also had these cool stakes, and it really paid off with some cool cliffhangers. And so that kind of got them on board. And what I didn't know at the time was that Jason was not just going to be writing Conan, because, you know, Jason Aaron's known for doing really long runs on books. So
Yeah.
I assumed he was going to be on Conan for years and years and years. And apparently he had a 12-issue story he wanted to tell, and that was kind of it. And then he was going to come back and do a King Conan thing later. And so after 12, they were already looking for another monthly writer for the book. And so after that Gambler story came in strong, they asked me to do this funky kind of crossover with Robert E. Howard characters and put a bit of a Marvel spin on it. And that became a miniseries called Serpent War. And so that's got like this character Solomon Kane and Dark Agnes. And it was a lot of fun. And the minute that I got that first script in, and I worked really hard on the research for the original kind of writing of Robert E. Howard and how these characters tie together and all their different timelines. And that script came in, and I think like 2 or 3 days later, Marvel made me the offer to take over the monthly. And I actually didn't say yes immediately, which sounds weird, because it's like, it was, well, I don't want to use the term bucket list, because bucket list makes it sound like I had the plan to write Conan. I didn't. I love the character. I thought it would never happen, so I didn't even have it on my wish list. But once the opportunity was there, I was like, oh my God, this thing's huge. I love this character. I would love to do that. It sounds great when someone wants to offer you that thing, but was Gambler what I needed to get out of my head? Was that the last piece of just sort of telling a good Conan story? And I drop the mic and I go, that's cool, Conan, later, everybody. Or do I have more? Do I have a lot of cool ideas and things I want to explore? And so I took a weekend to think about it. And I came back on the Monday and I said, yes, I'm super interested. I brainstormed a bunch of stuff. I re-tapped into why I love this character, and I'm ready to go. And then we got shellacked by the pandemic stuff, where the book, my run on the book, came out just as the world was sort of folding up, and everything kind of went into a tailspin. And so we worked really hard on the monthly series, and we did the best we could with it. But it's just the state of the world, and it's hard to build up hype for issue 13 of an ongoing run. And you know, I think I was very much treating it like a marathon. I was like, I want to be on this book for a long time. I'm going to tell a lot of these long and intricate kind of funky stories that remind me of the stuff I liked about Conan comics in the 70s and the 80s. And I think in a different time, under different auspice, it would have been just fine. But it also didn't feel like event reading. It didn't feel like, have you read this month's Conan? It's going to blow your mind. Do you know what I mean? It was just like good, solid line drive kind of sword and sorcery. And then it all went away. You know, Marvel decided not to renew their license, and Heroic kind of carried on and decided they were going to go into, you know, publish their own books and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I wasn't doing Conan anymore. And I was like, damn, it was so cool and so fun while I had it. I wish it had gone differently. But I stayed in touch with Fred Malmberg, who's in charge of Heroic Signatures, the rights holders. And he was very polite and very nice. And he's like, you know, we love the work you did, and we think you really got a handle on the voice for the character and the type of storytelling. Please stay in touch. And of course, that's what everyone says. That's the nice thing that everyone does, you know. But I thought that would be the end of it. I thought it would be like if there was an anniversary issue, or maybe like a mini series or something, they would get me back involved and I might be able to contribute. Or if it was an anniversary, I'd come around. It's like the all-star game. You just sort of wave and then you hit the ball a couple times and you get to do your thing or whatever. But they asked me to pitch hard and kind of go, tell us like dream version of this book, what you would do if, you know, all bets were off. And I told my wife, I said, well, I'll never get it because no one launches a book with the same writer like at a different publisher. That's a terrible marketing plan. So she's like, well, then there's nothing to fear. Just pitch what you want. And that's exactly what I did. I pitched sort of the dream version of the book, and I really swung for the fences with the ideas and big long-term planning and big, crazy, cool stuff. And they really, really, really responded to it. And they said, we think you're the guy. And I was boggled. I think for a bit there, I almost tried to talk them out of it because it was like, this is nuts. Like, how can, like, really? like you're going to let me do this thing, all of it. And then they said, you know, who would you get to draw it? And the guy I wanted, you know, right out of the gate was Rob De La Torre.
Are you serious? Because
yeah.
So where did you see his art?
So, I mean, when you write Conan, any popular character, ask Zdarsky about Batman or anything else, you just get sent stuff. If anything is even tangentially related to a character you're working on, people just send you links and they send you memes and they send you things. And so I had seen a few of Rob's commission pieces kind of float through the ether of the internet. I don't remember which one I saw first, but I still didn't take note that that was like this one dude cranking out these phenomenal pieces. It wasn't until we had a variant cover for one of the issues of Conan that I did. And it came in and my jaw dropped. It was such a phenomenal piece. I want to say it's issue 16, I think. It might have been 16. There was a De La Torre variant. And it was crazy. It was beautiful. It looked like Buscema by way of Frazetta. It had this pulp and this power. And I said, who the hell is this guy? And Mark, my editor, goes, oh, you know, he's this European guy. He's really cool. We're talking to him about doing potentially some stuff down the road. And he's done some other stuff for Marvel, but he really loves Conan. I was like, you're damn right he does. Does he do sequentials? Like I was just,
oh, right. That is a good question because
sometimes people are amazing illustrators and great cover artists, but they don't necessarily do the storytelling or panel to panel. And so I saw he did a story in King Size Conan that they released.
Yeah, that's the first time I saw his art.
That knocked me out. I was like, oh my God, he does sequentials.
Dude, I remember thinking because I was doing an overview on the channel and I thought, and I had to cut it because I think I dropped the F-bomb because I was like, it's like somebody took,
right?
Because somebody
it's too good. It does just summon swear words right out of it.
Oh my God. It's so good. Like it felt like channeling that John Buscema and Joe Kubert. Like, I don't know, man. It just,
it's
with a modern,
it's like a pulp dream. It's so good. And so Rob and I had stayed in touch. I ordered a commission from him because I was like, this guy's crazy, you know, and he had a pretty long waiting list. His entire commission waitlist had turned into Conan. Every single collector
I bet
wanted a Conan piece, a sketch or a headpiece or an action piece or whatever, because he does these, like, they look like Renaissance paintings of death. They're just like these insane flailing of bodies in that Frazetta kind of style. And they're unbelievable. The anatomy's great, the dynamicism and everything else. And so he and I stayed in touch, and when the Marvel stuff all crumbled, he he was like, oh, I was really hoping to do Conan, but I guess it's not going to happen, like doing more Conan. And I said, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen next. And so he and I were already communicating about potentially doing a creator-owned thing. We were like, well, worst case scenario, we file the serial numbers off Conan and we just do our own kind of like badass, you know, survival fantasy guy. Clearly an homage to Conan. But then I was having these conversations with Fred Malmer at Heroic, and then I pitched them this idea, and then they said, we want to do it. Who would you get to draw it? And I said, Rob's my number one pick. And they said, can you get him? And I'm like, I don't, maybe, like I'm in touch with him. It's possible.
Right.
And so we started kind of negotiating it out. And we were like, look, the way I put it to Rob was really simple. I said, you love Conan. This is the real deal. This is grabbing the brass ring. You get to do the real book. You already have a commission list, you know, longer than the length of my arm, of people who want you to do Conan. And you're not even the official Conan artist. Not really. I said, do this book with me and you will be, you know, like set in terms of the collector's mind.
That's a good pitch. That's a good pitch, Jim.
If you do this the way I know you can do it, let alone the fact he works traditionally, those are not digital. So he's also selling that original artwork. And
why would you tell me that?
The collectors have gone berserk. Absolutely.
Yeah. The
yeah,
Conan
I knew that stuff was going to be wild when Alex Ross's art dealer, I think, bought like a quarter of an issue or something, like bought a whole swack of pages. And I was like, that guy kind of recognizes quality. So Rob and I, you know, we came on to the book, and we were talking about what he liked about working with other writers and processes and all this stuff. And he said one of the things that frustrated him was when writers put too much text on a page and they're kind of pushing out the artwork. And I said, well, let's do it, you know, old school Marvel style, like just like Roy Thomas would have. I'll write it an outline, what happens on a page in terms of the major events.
Yeah.
You draw the page, leave me some room, and then I'll fill in the text. I'll fill in the dialogue. I'll fill in the narration. And he's like, do people do that? And I said, I will try. And the Free Comic Book Day issue was our proof of concept. That was literally the first time we had done that. And it worked out real good. So
you literally gave him a plot line.
Yeah. And it says on this page, you know, Conan charges forth. And I don't tell him beat by beat, cut off a guy's head or whatever. I usually just tell him this is an action page. By the end of this page, if someone gets injured, I tell them they get injured, or if they're changing location,
limiting
like
his frames.
No, I'm not telling him how many panels it takes. I'll tell him if I think this is a splash. Like, hey man, this is a page turn. This is the moment. This is a title page. Go crazy. But usually, whatever number of panels he wants, or I'll say, this is a conversation. Give me panels, and he'll give me panels. I don't tell him how many. And I'll say, you know, this is a stern conversation, or they're angry at each other. If there's a very specific line of dialogue that I know we have to have in there, or if it's like the revelation or a moment, I will include that. And I'll say, we need a panel where so-and-so looks shocked because they just found out, fill in the blank. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. But most of the time, I don't even tell them what the dialogue is going to be. I just say, it's a conversation, and these people are really pissed off at each other. And then he just does the paneling on it. And then I come back in and I go, okay, they look angriest on this panel. So I have to figure out dialogue that's going to hit that beat and then kind of drop out, and then stuff like this, or the narrative kind of captioning, which is very old school and very 70s, adding kind of atmospheric description to the pages, or trying to summon up that Robert E. Howard worthy kind of prose to describe information that you're not seeing on the page, you know, the smell and the intensity, the textures and the touch and the taste of these things, and try and fill it out in a way that feels like the best of the old school, you know, but with the kind of fidelity we can put on the page, and with a mature reader's, you know, rating that we can go more violent and more sexy than any Conan book has gone before. So yeah, it's a real trip. And when it works, and it works, like when that artwork comes in, even though I've written the thing, I don't, you know, when I see that page in front of me and I go, holy crap, this is what he has put together. Now I got to live up to it. I got to live up to those visuals and try and summon the words to make it feel as powerful as possible, you know?
Damn, that is so cool that you guys are
It is.
working
It
that way.
is. It's a
I didn't
really
know that.
different working method. Yeah, it's very alchemical, and it's different from. So Doug Braithwaite, for example, is drawing the second arc, and
Yeah.
Doug is a
Okay.
phenomenal artist. He's a
Mhm.
veteran. He's totally incredible. I met him years and years ago in England at a convention, and we'd stayed in touch in general. And then his name got floated up about possibly him drawing some Conan stuff to offset, so Rob would have enough time to do the issues.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, that'd be amazing. We could jumped on a call. And Doug is like, I've always wanted to draw Conan, but I don't know the character intrinsically. You've got to educate me. And I was like, no problem. Here's some books to read. Here's some cool stuff. Here's my favorite comics. Here's things you need to dig into. And then I said, do you want me to do, we're doing this sort of Marvel plot style with Rob. And he goes, I would prefer if you wrote full script. And I was like, okay, no problem. So they're completely different looking scripts between the two arcs. The scripts for Doug are traditional kind of, here's 5 panels, here's
Yeah.
the
Okay.
text that's going to be on that panel. But because I built up this head of steam with Rob, I've got this much more kind of pulpy voice for the book. And it's
Mhm.
just been continuing through, and Doug is such a pro. He's able to make judicious choices. So sometimes I'll describe something as a 1-panel action and he'll split it, or vice versa. He'll sometimes combine actions into a panel or change up the, oh, this moment will work better. Let's nudge it over to the next page. And it's like, that's cool, man. Like, I trust you. We're going to make it work. I'm not worried about it. Both of these guys, like both art teams, are just awesome. They're like top of their game, top-notch professionals. And so my job is to communicate and, inspire them and let them know what the most important visual components are, and then let them do what they do best. My text is not there to get in the way. I'm not here to like overwhelm the discourse. I want to enhance. Like, that's the job, right? And it's such a visual tour de force on the book. Both of them are phenomenal and bring in their A game to every issue. And so, I just want to raise them up. I just want everyone to see how cool it is. And the response has been electric. Like, it's been
Okay. Okay.
one of the biggest launches of my career. Yeah.
I gotta stop you because let's talk about the responses, because there's a
Sure,
lot of
sure.
people here
Oh,
that
cool. Awesome.
are
You're her
big
way. Oh
fans.
my gosh.
Uh, so James Conan was the first Conan
Yeah.
I've read. I've been buying every issue and enjoying it. Does Jim know how many issues he? I want to come back to that question here in a second.
Sure.
Let me
That
give you some
guy is
credit.
currently watching on the stream and he's like, give me the answer. So your LCS
We'll come
sells out
back
of
to that,
Conan
Ryan.
every week.
My
Yeah,
local,
that I've been
that's
hearing that
wonderful.
everywhere. The book is, we're in this really rare spot right now where sales on the book are rising. So, issue 1 obviously has crazy variant covers and all the,
Mhm.
people trying a new number 1. And you always have your drop off, usually a pretty steep drop off depending on the series. But what's rare is that usually the first issue sells the most, then 2's way down there, and then it just slowly declines. And most publishers, they're like, how much decline can we handle before we find stable ground? And then if we find stable ground, how long can we hold that stable ground, for a run? And in the modern comic industry, it feels like there's very little stability. Like, if you're not an absolute flagship title, like an Amazing Spider-Man or a Batman, you just
What
don't.
we're used to here in the Western market,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
the monthly machine that
Yeah,
Marvel
it just
put
feels
out.
like these books are on quicksand. Like, a lot of them are sinking fast and they get rebooted so quickly. And in turn, you got that diminishing returns, this feeling of like, well, it's a new number 1. Yeah, but there was a
Mhm.
new number 1 like 8 or 9 months ago. Like, what is special about this? What is exciting about this? And we held off on relaunching Conan for over a year. And people were like, why is it taking you guys so long to launch Conan? And it was like, we wanted to have a bunch of work in the can, and we wanted to create a little bit of distance, and we wanted people to be hungry for it and excited for it.
Mhm.
And the relaunch has been bonkers. Like, yes, issue 1 was huge, massive, the biggest book that Titan has ever launched by more than double. And then issue 2, we hit, we were like, man, that would be a really good level if we could keep it at the level we have for 2. And now, like, each issue we're rising back up. So we're climbing 3, 4, 5, 6. Sales are rising on the book. And almost every issue has had a second printing. First issue had 6 printings, which is insane. Issue 2 had 3 printings, 3 printings on issue 3, and then 2 printings, I think, on each issue since then. And so the we haven't found our level yet, and our level is rising, which is highly unusual in this market. And it's been crazy. The number of people that tell me the book sells out instantly, that they subscribed and they're desperate for every issue. I have never, ever gotten a fan response like this to anything I've ever done. Even when I was running Avengers, even when I was running Rick and Morty and stuff like that, like the fan response has been just incredible and very heartwarming and exciting and intimidating in all the best kind of ways, you know?
I can vouch for Always an Instigator, not a Conan fan, but is loving Conan now. Zub
Sweet, man.
Torres, the best team.
Thank you. I love hearing that, man. It's like Rob is elevated this damn book and brought it to the fandom. I New York this year. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to chat. You were saying you're at New York. And
you're a busy guy in New York.
It was crazy. I had these people, like people old enough to be my uncle, coming over to the table with like sparkles in their eyes, and they're like, "He's back. You brought the real deal back. He's the real Conan. He's the greatest." And I was just like, holy crap. Like the passion awesome. That this character has. Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're talking about 90 years worth of prose publishing, 50 years worth of comic publishing. It is literally generational, right? And so to have that responsibility and the honor to be able to add to that legacy and to do right by it is a joy. And the passion that I see from people, and I'm not saying this to be, I'm on a couple Conan collector forums on Facebook. These guys asked me if I would join, and I said I'm not going to be able to post very often, but sure, I'd love to be. You know, I'm busy, but yes, I'd love to see the passion, whatever. And some of these people, like literally collectors, who have their man cave is a Conan room. Like they have floor to ceiling Conan stuff. They have statues and toys and posters and awesome. Signed photos and slabbed comics and literal, you know, movie reproduction swords and all this stuff. And the first couple you see of this, you think, oh, wow, this is wild. I'm not kidding. Like 30 or 40 of these people, 50 of these people, 100 of these people posting their Conan corners and their Conan collections and their entire bookshelves of all the omnibuses and everything else. And you're like, this is the thing you are now plugged into. This is the legacy that you are a very tiny part of. It's very weird in the best way possible. You're like, it takes you aback because you're just like, oh God, like, don't screw this up, man. This is people's favorite thing.
I gotta ask
absolute favorite thing.
This question, because you are getting a lot of praise, like from Adam and David. Personally, was going to pass on Titans Conan series, but I picked up the free comic book day.
Oh, sweet! That's what it was there for. The free comic book day issue was there. We knew we had a lot to prove. You know. So that's very nice.
Yeah, I'm serious, man. There's lots of praises for you here. And then I got some other questions about Dungeons and Dragons that people have been asking. You ever look at your like? Have you ever opened up a book and like an issue and you're like, damn, I am.
I mean, it's always the art, right? Like the art, comics are a visual medium. If the artist delivers on the potential of what, like, if I can write it in a way that spurs on their imagination and their hard work, it's one thing to write 50 people smash into each other in an you know, orgy of death and destruction. It's another thing for some poor human being to draw that. And, you know, I give all the praise to Doug and to Rob for what they've been able to do to elevate it visually and to bring that dynamic order. Yes, I've built the plot and we've come up with the characters, and I feel very strong about the long-term plan that we have, the mythic stuff that we're summoning and things like that. But if the art wasn't there, people wouldn't be sticking around. And the art is unimpeachably awesome. And so my career has been sent into the stratosphere thanks to their efforts. And I you know, thank I'm so thankful for the team that we've got, the passion that we've got. You know, Richard Starking's one of the greatest letterers in the business. Guy who helped pioneer digital lettering in the industry. He sought out Titan and asked them if he could letter this book because he had seen Rob's Conan books. Richard, when he was growing up, Conan was his favorite comic. He did the lettering for Conan at Dark Horse for years, and he really wanted to do it again. And he knew that Rob's art was going to just send it, you know, flying. And so I've got Richard Starkings now has become a friend, which is crazy to me. I didn't even think I've told this anecdote before, so I apologize if some people maybe on the stream have heard this before. I'm at San Diego Comic-Con. We've got advanced copies of issue 1. I'm walking past. I'm so excited. I've got this printed version of the book in my hands. I can't wait. I'm walking past Richard Starking's booth, the Comicraft booth, and he's like holding court because he knows everybody in comics, right? And I'm like, I want to thank him for his hard work on the book, but he's also busy talking to people.
Oh, of course.
I'll bug him later. It's preview night. I got 5 days. I can see him. So I'm walking past and he shoves his way out of the booth and he comes running over to me and he goes, "Oh, Jim, you're not going to walk by, are you?" And I was like, Richard, I didn't even think you knew what I looked like. And he looks at me with the kindest face and he just goes, "Well, of course, I've been watching your interviews." And so it's like, he's a fan. He's a lifelong Conan fan. He's so proud and excited to be part of this book. And we both just sat there in the aisle, excitedly talking about how much fun this book was.
Yeah.
And he's telling me that this is the most fun he's had lettering a book in over a decade. And he wants it to be perfect. And he loves working on the book. And Rob's the greatest and all this kind of stuff. And he's just praising me on the writing and the plotting. And it felt so amazing to have someone that I respect so much, their work, tell me that they were a fan of what I was doing. And he says to me, he goes, "Do you want to know the best part about working on Conan?" And I'm like, "What's the best part of working on my book, Richard?" And he leans into me, just this impish little grin, and he goes, "I get to see it before anyone else."
Oh, that's so awesome.
And you're like, I mean, come on, man. Like the greatest compliment I could have gotten from one of my favorite people in comics. Like, so cool that the work that we're doing engenders that kind of, passion.
And I don't know if people realize this or not. Richard's old school when it comes to lettering.
Yeah.
Like, there's a true,
he's a master of the art form.
Wonderful art form to
and that
lettering.
guy,
like
since San Diego, we'll jump on a Zoom call, and we'll nitpick through the lettering proof and like make it just right. And he wants to. He contacts me and he's like, "Oh, Jim, I want to go over a few things with you." And he just wants to nudge things, or what if we move this, or
the placing, the letter, like it's just amazing.
Everything, the logo work and everything.
Honestly, letterers don't, and his entire team, Comicraft,
yes,
like
they're amazing.
They are phenomenal at what they do, and I don't
think
enough people realize.
I've never, if lettering is done poorly, it destroys the reading experience. And if it's done well, it enhances to a point where people take it for granted, because you're too busy flowing through the artwork from caption to caption and bubble to bubble to even realize, word balloon to word balloon, that you've been taken on a trip. You know what I mean? It's been, this is the kind of stuff that keeps me so happy about working on the book and working with an entire team, whether it's, Dean White or Diego Rodriguez on colors, everyone in editorial. You got, Chris Butera and, Ashley and just everybody, Fred and Jay at Heroic. Everyone is so awesome. And when I get these compliments and these comments, and they're constant, I wake up in the morning and someone in Europe is asking me when it's coming out in their local language, because Panini is going to be publishing it in 5 or 6 languages.
Oh, nice.
And they cannot wait. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of excitement it's blowing my mind in all the best ways. Just seeing these comments flashing up at the bottom. I'm
highlighting some.
It's putting the biggest grin on my face, man. It's so cool.
I love when this happens, right? Because you come from a place of being a fan, and you've been on the other side where you have
absolutely.
People, and so you understand what it feels like. And I think it's wonderful that you are getting this, and rightly so.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
And
the book feels really, really special. And it's something where everyone is pushing forward with the most passion and excitement. And this morning, it's Monday morning, I got artwork in from Being Canadians Alpha. That's amazing. Yes. Love Alpha Flight. So good. But being on this book is like, I get to wake up on a Monday morning, and Doug has been up for a few hours. He sent us a bunch of artwork from issue 13 already. And Rob is sending in artwork from issue 11 right now. And everything looks incredible. It just looks phenomenal. It makes me like want to, backflip my way through the rest of the day. How could I not be excited that this is my job? It's so much fun. Okay. So I saw some questions coming up here. Someone said, "Jim, will you have more variant covers by Carrie Nord?" Carrie is doing a story. I'm not writing it, but Carrie's doing a story in the new Savage Sword magazine. I don't know which issue, but he's going to be in an upcoming issue of Savage Sword. So you're going to get more Carrie Nord. I would love to talk Carrie into doing an issue or two on the monthly down the line. But I don't know if that'll be possible.
His relaunch, he is the reason I got into Conan.
Oh, dude, the Busiek Nord run. Yeah.
So
it's phenomenal.
I mean, okay, besides the cartoon and the movies,
sure,
right?
Sure, but you've got to keep in mind. So that issue 0, I think it's called Conan the Legend. It came out in 2003. That was our measuring stick when we were doing the Free Comic Day issue, 2023. I was like, people are going to be comparing us to that 0 issue that they did at Dark Horse. So we have got to, not that we can surpass it, but we have to at least like create that kind of impression. We have to like give people the most solid introduction to Conan possible so that they feel confident that we have got the property in good hands, and then they're going to follow us on to the monthly book. And thankfully the Free Comic Day issue worked exactly the way I hoped, that it like kind of galvanized and excited the fan base. It was like a lightning, shock through the system of the Conan fandom. And the number of people, like I said, who contacted me and said, I haven't been to a comic book store in years. I'm going to my store and I'm setting up a subscription. I haven't collected in years and I'm back.
I almost messaged you, man, on Twitter. I could not find a damn copy of the
people. So a bunch of collectors were messaging me like, do you have these variants? Can I mail you my books?
It wasn't even a variant. It was the Free Comic Book Day.
Like, dude. I did a signing at Third Eye Comics, one of my favorite shops in.
Yeah, somebody was asking you to come back there.
Third Eye is the greatest. It's an incredible store. Steve and Trish are phenomenal. We did Free Comic Day, and I signed. Oh my God, I think I signed 3,000 copies of Conan #0, man. Like, it was mental. And the number of collectors that contacted when they found out I was doing Free Comic Day at Third Eye, they contacted them ahead of time and said, I want to buy a copy. Will you mail it to me signed? And they sold hundreds and hundreds of copies signed of that 0 issue from Third Eye. It was nuts. It was the craziest signing I've ever done.
Yeah, that's awesome,
I signed. Man. Yeah, it was unbelievable. I remember I sent photos to the I sent photos to the rights holders, and their eyes were bugging out. They couldn't believe the number of copies that the store had. I think when they put in their order with Diamond called them like 3 times to double check that that's how many they wanted, because it was just such a mental amount of books. So any chance you can expect your Conan run in oversized hardcover? So I don't know the timing on that stuff. So the first trade, Bound in Blackstone, comes out February 13th. It's like day before Valentine's Day. That's the trade. And they're going to do, slim trades of each of the arcs as we go. There has been talk of a hardcover, but I have no idea when it's going to come about. This is just me theorizing. This is nothing official from Heroic. I suspect you won't see anything until we've got 12, the 3 arcs collected in single trades, and then there's the potential for a larger hardcover. I would love to see that, because it's sort of like a year 1 of our run, and when I say year 1, that means I want many years, on this book. Like, this is where I want to be for the foreseeable future.
So let's go back to this question then, because I asked you this question off camera about at Lexington Comic Con.
Yeah, how long
before the Free Comic Book Day?
So I remember before Free Comic Day came out,
you had 2 arcs. You said that you were ready.
Yeah, well, 2 arcs. I said when they contacted me, they actually said, we want a long-term creative partner. Will you stay on for 2 years? Will you do 24 issues? That was the original discussion. And I thought to myself, man, I get to do Conan again, and they want me to do 24 issues. This is a dream come true. The good news is that I am on for a minimum of 24 issues, and we're already deep in discussion on what happens after those. And so to 24 minimum, but that doesn't include Savage Sword, and it doesn't include the event book that we're going to be doing this fall.
So what is your role in, and for the people that are now joining or have never picked up a Conan book, there's the Conan line and there's the Savage Sword line. And to put it professionally, Savage Sword tends to be a little more violent and
see, what's crazy is we can get away with Savage Sword, more than Savage Sword violence in the monthly book now, because it's a mature reader's title. Whereas at Marvel and at Dark Horse, it was just sort of like PG equivalent, I believe.
Okay.
So now the regular monthly book is an R-rated movie equivalent. Savage Sword is just going to be the classic oversized black and white. So it's magazine sized. It's anthology style. So there's different creators in every issue. So I am doing multiple Savage Sword stories in black and white, and they are kind
Oh
of
my gosh, you're gonna turn
self-contained.
into this generation's Roy Thomas, dude.
Oh, I would love to be, but I'm not doing one in every issue. So,
Okay.
for example, there's different creators coming on. Pat Zerker is doing a Solomon Kane story that's going to be running in the magazine. Other creators, like I know that Frank Thierry is coming back to do a story. There's a bunch of other creators that haven't even been announced yet that are going to be doing all kinds of different stuff. And so I'm one of those creators that's going to be in the rotation, and very, very excited about it because the black and white and getting to work with different artists and getting these different page length kind of format rather than being, the monthly kind of format. But that book is meant to be a showcase for all sorts of different people. It's an amazing.
There's your chance, Josh.
Man. That's right. Well, there's going to be pinups just like the old book. There's going to be shorter stories. There's going to be longer stories. So a bunch of people have emailed me and they said, well, how do I get in touch with them? The fan email address, it just goes to editorial. So if you actually send an email to chainmail, all one word, @conan.com, that's where you send a portfolio. That's where you get in touch about. They do have a lot of people that they've already contacted for variant covers and for Savage Sword, but obviously if the work is crazy, then I'm sure that would be a good way to get on their radar. So I've got this 2-year commitment to the monthly title, and then I've got these side stories that I'm doing as well. We're doing a big event that's going to be coming out this fall. So the free comic book day issue that comes out in May this year is sort of the big setup for this cool Conan event.
When does Savage Sword come out?
Savage Sword's next month. It's end of February.
What?
Crossing my fingers.
Okay.
They've been having shipping delays and stuff for a bunch of things.
February is going to be a big Conan month with the release of your trade paperback, collecting the first 4 issues and the free comic book day, and the release of Savage.
Oh yeah.
In the trade paperback of last year's Conan, and then the release of Savage Sword.
It's going to be massive. It's going to be massive. We're so pumped. And then I'm working on a Savage Sword story that's being drawn by Richard Pace. And it's this story idea I had ages ago, and I sort of spun it past him. And we got this big, long page count to be able to tell this excruciating survival story, this intense, crazy story. So that's the first one that I'm doing for Savage Sword. I'm pretty sure it's going to be in issue 2 of Savage Sword. The book's coming out every other month. So it launches in February. So that'll be April when the Richard Pace story that I'm doing with him comes out. And then I've got in issue 1, I don't have a comic story. I have a prose story. This is kind of intimidating. So what happened was they contacted the absolute classic, Joe Jusko, one of the greatest.
Oh, wow.
Illustrators. He did the cover to Savage Sword, #1 for us. And I knew they already had their creators lined up for who was going to be doing, the comic story. And I said, is there any way I can fit into this issue? They used to have essays and all sorts of funky things in Savage Sword along with the comic story. I just want to have a page in there so I can say I was in Savage Sword #1, and they laughed and they said, you're our flagship writer, Jim. We will find a way to work you in. And then they said, Jusko's doing this cover. Do you want to do a bit of fiction based on that cover image? And so Joe was already designing the cover, but it wasn't finalized yet. So he and I bounced emails back and forth. I was trying not to fanboy out because it's Joe Jusko. And we figured out exactly how we're going to do it. It is the first Jusko cover in over 20 years. That's true. He said it felt like going home again. It was very, very kind.
That's great.
And so he did this incredible image. And then I came up with a fiction story that I put together based on that artwork. And sent it in. And I was sort of nervous. It is magazine format. It's oversized. It's black and white, just like the old school. Please add it to your subscription list because it's going to be real special. We're doing 6 issues and we're going to see how the sales go. And then we'd love to make it, constant. But because it's coming out every other month, it's going to be a year's worth of new Savage Sword. And if it sells well, then we're just going to keep it rolling. So it's really up to the fans at this point. If they've been telling us for years, this is the format they want. They want black and white. They want it magazine size. They want it big and bold and crazy. And so we're putting all of our best into it. And hopefully it has the kind of response that the monthly book has had, in which case it'll just be a constant part of the line. But yeah, I've got this prose story, this short story that I put together called Sacrifice in the Sand. That's going to be in issue 1. And that was intimidating because I'm trying to write a pulp story in the style, in what they call a pastiche, in the style of Robert E. Howard, in the style of the old pulps. And you don't have Rob de la Torre or Doug Braithwaite to make you look good, you know, like, I mean, Joe Jusko, don't get me wrong, but that's just one image. Paragraph after paragraph, I've got to summon those ideas in your mind. It's a whole different skill set. And it was a really cool one too. I'm very, proud of the work that I put into the story. And then I've got a comic story in issue 2. And then each issue going forward, there's going to be all sorts of different content there for Savage Sword while the monthly continues ever onward. And I've got so many. So between the Savage Sword stories, the event book, the free comic day, and the monthly, at this moment, in different stages of production, probably 5 different Conan stories that I'm working on. So it's wild. It is absolutely wild. It's a joy. It's exactly where I want to be. It's an absolute blast. But it's like we're getting artwork in for all these different stories and all these different things, and some of them tie together. So you're also trying to make sure all the continuity works and the visual motifs carry through. The artist I'm working with on the free comic day issue is this guy Jonas Scharf. Have you ever heard of him?
No. So
he is amazing. He's
okay.
an amazing European artist. He's done some stuff at Marvel, and he kind of got on our radar. I can't remember who first sent us his stuff. He did a graphic novel for the picture that was really, really badass.
Okay.
And his black and whites are stunning. And so I was like, man, I love this guy's stuff. We reached out to him, and then it was a matter of scheduling. And so he's going to be doing the free comic day issue. Well, he's done it now. And the event book that we're doing this fall. So he's doing this 4-issue miniseries called Battle of the Blackstone that we're doing this fall. And his design works beautiful. His page art's stunning. He's a wonderful addition to the kind of Conan family here. And I think readers are going to freak out when they see his stuff. So it's awesome. Very cool. And he and I got to meet for the first time at New York Comic Con. We went out for dinner, and I was explaining to him how Rob works versus how Doug works with full script versus plot style.
I was about to ask you how you work with other artists.
And so he said he'd never worked plot style before, but he wanted to give it a shot. So would we be willing to do it on free comic day and see if it worked? And it did. And so he's working, I guess we'll call it Roy Thomas plot style, Conan style on the event book. Oh man, Gerardo Zaffino is so good. That guy. He did one of the alt covers for Savage Sword, and he's got pinups and stuff that are going to be in future issues. They're taking the classic, there's a Robert E. Howard poem called The Road of Kings, and they put it beside a Gerardo Zaffino pinup, and it just looks so badass. I was like, oh my God, people are going to freak when they see this.
Okay. We'll take a break from Conan to answer this. Sure. Kenny's been asking for a while. Well, was it like working with Scott Snyder on the post-DC Rebirth run of Justice League?
I have the weirdest thing. I did not work on the post-DC Rebirth run of Justice League. That is not me. I don't know if you're thinking another writer. If people think, I don't know if Zeb Wells did that. One of the most common things that happens right now is I
can see Zeb Wells people getting mixed up with
people will send me messages and they're like, Zub, what have you done to Spider-Man? And I'm like,
please tell me you take advantage of that. You're like,
we joke about it. So there's an amazing photo of Zeb, who's the nicest guy, by the way. Yeah. If you ever get a chance to meet him, holy crap, he's so nice. We were at a convention, the first time I finally got to meet him in person, and we took a photo. We're like punching, fists, and it says Zeb Zub, and it was just like, it was like super fun.
Yeah, it's the last name and the first name. That's what it is.
That's right. We joked that we should do a book together and just call it, like the creative team will be Zeb Zub, and it would just be the most ludicrous thing ever.
I never thought about it, but I can kind of see that. It's the whole Tom Taylor, Tom King thing
Yeah,
again, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it is a weird thing. So every so often, yeah, and vice versa. Like he literally, he'll screenshot and send me fan mail he gets about Conan, where they're just like, "I can't believe you're writing Spider-Man and Conan," and he's like, "Yeah, yeah,
well,
no,
Kenny,
it's all, there it is."
You're not the only one, Kenny. You're not the only one.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's totally the way it always goes.
Go buy some Conan instead.
That's right.
Buy some Conan instead.
Get your Zub on. It's all good. It's all good. You said you had some questions about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, I did. This is more of a question for you.
Sure.
Let me see. That somebody asked way early, but then I got all into the Conan.
Well, hopefully they're still sticking around, or they'll catch it on.
Well, they'll watch the replay. Okay, Jim. Favorite D&D racing class. There we go.
Oh, so D&D race wise, it's so hard to choose, honestly. I love rogues, I'll tell you that. Thieves and rogues, depending on what edition of D&D you've got. I love the sneaky guys. I love the dexterous characters. I love the nimble. And in the original D&D, they were the only ones that could like spring traps and pick locks and climb walls, and all that kind of stuff. So I love the old school thieves. Race wise, I would always be kind of a mix. I like, humans and half elves and kind of stuff like that. It's funny because when the original Planescape books came out, they introduced the tieflings, and at the time they were so interesting because they were different. And now it's like everyone loves tieflings because they've got like horns and they look like they're slightly demonic. So it's funny that I thought they were super cool when like Tony Dieter-Lisi drew them back in the Planescape books. And now I feel like if I say tieflings, everyone's going to be like, oh, of course everyone loves tieflings. So it feels like it's all played out now. And I don't want to be that guy that's like, I liked them before they were. But I kind of did. Like I have a complete collection of Planescape just off camera on a shelf here. I have a complete first edition D&D collection in boxes just off camera. So like, no joke too. I was doing research today for a project I can't talk about, but it's like, that's first edition D&D, DMG. That's Monster Manual. This is
project
called
you can't talk about.
Yeah, this is called the home set. So it's like the first D&D basic box set. I just have them sitting here in my office. So
how often? Okay, I got to ask the question. I've been invited to play a Dungeons and Dragons game online.
Yeah.
Some of my wonderful viewers, and I like a sucker said, okay, but I'll do a one off, and you can kill my character off. How often do you find yourself? Because you got to be a busy guy. You got to be writing.
Yeah, I don't play as much as I would like. So during the pandemic, I actually had a regular game going. There was a group of comic creators. We would play on Zoom every Wednesday night. And I was the only creator that wasn't on the West Coast. So it was like this awkward thing where by the time we wrapped up a session, it's like 1 a.m. and I'm super tired. But I was playing with Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, Joe.
Dude, I love those guys. No offense to Jim Zub, but those guys
are amazing. They're great. They're so good. So they're also super fun RPG guys. So I was playing with Jody Hauser, Lucas Kettner, Zach Davison. There was a whole crew of us.
Look at you name dropping your Dungeons
Dragons. Because they're comic creators. They're people know. But it was a lot of fun. But we didn't just play D&D. We played all kinds of different games. So what we would usually do is people took turns running different games. So like Zach ran a Cyberpunk one-off, and I ran Feng Shui, which is this Hong Kong action movie role-playing game that I absolutely love. Jackson ran a Star Wars one-off for us. Zach ran a Call of Cthulhu one-off. It was super fun.
How did you guys keep track of your characters?
Well, we would just play like 4 or 5 sessions. Almost everyone would die. And then someone would kick off another one. So
I thought you were like in the middle of a game. That would give me a headache.
No, we just kept kicking the tires on fun games we'd always wanted to play. So this question here says the Glass Cannon. The new Marvel Multiverse tabletop RPG is a blast, by the way. It's really well put together. My buddy Matt Forbeck was the developer on it. He did a fantastic job. Glass Cannon is a online, like a streaming group that does RPGs. They got their start with Pathfinder, but now they're doing all sorts of different stuff. That was great. That was so much fun. We had a blast doing that stream at New York. Nick Lowe, who's editor on the Spider-Man series, he and I and a group of the Glass Cannon crew, we ran the new Marvel RPG. I got to play Captain America, which was a lot of fun because I'm a Canadian, so I'm there like your favorite, Sentinel of Liberty, played by this guy from Toronto. Bart Sears would be awesome, man. We've been in touch with so many like old school Conan artists or old school Marvel artists, all sorts of good stuff. Oh, that's right,
Thank
Basilisk.
you, Annex.
Yes,
That's where I've seen it.
Jonas is so good. Anyway, yeah, he's been amazing to work with. He's such a hard worker too. Can't wait for you guys to see this thing. Also, this guy's name is Mighty Thews, which is a really cool, like ludicrous Conan reference. Roy Thomas would constantly, I mean, in the original Robert E. Howard stories, he would occasionally mention the thews of Conan, like how strong his thews were. And so Roy Thomas uses it a bunch. So it's kind of a running gag. So dude, your call sign is amazing here.
Conan
Thank you.
Late 80s from down under. Just wanted to say
yeah,
cheers.
man. That's the thing. When I say it's generational, these people, they came over to me. I was at the Toronto Fan Expo at the end of last summer, and these guys came over and they bought copies of Conan to send to all their buddies who couldn't come to the show. Like they bought like 10 copies and they were going to mail them out. So I was personalizing them for all these different old school fans. Like that's what's so cool about it.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
Just read the first arc of his Conan last night, been on my pull list since issue 1, and wow, absolutely fantastic. Please keep doing this, going for years. Sorry.
That's my plan, man. Like that's the thing that's so fun right now. There's so many times in modern comics where you want to stretch out and do big, long runs on things, but the confluences in the market and sales and just stability seems so out of whack. And what feels so cool right now is we've got a strong reader base, we've got the wind at our backs, and we're just trying to build out something that earns that cover price every single month and does it for people. And that's what is so cool, is that I had a meeting on Friday with the editorial team over at Heroic, and we were talking about, deep in year 2, like what's going on and what happens after that, and how do we build this thing and keep it going, and what are these big long-term plans. And I'm talking about stuff that's not going to be published for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just confident, like, okay, and then we hit this, and then at that moment, this pays off, and this thing happens, and these things go over here. And if you come in to read at any point, you still get a good sword and sorcery story. But if you've been following all the way along, you'll appreciate this building kind of, mythology that we've been playing on, and trying to find that cool balance where it's like, every few issues we've got a new arc, and it's like a cool Conan story if you just want like a classic adventure, but then you see these little pieces that carry over from previous stories, and you realize that there's more going on. The reader knows what's going on, even if Conan doesn't see the full forest for the trees, kind of thing. That's what's cool about it.
Man, this is you have opened my. I want to keep talking about this for hours, because we just talk about
Conan. Good, man. I know.
But I know you're gonna write and do other stuff apparently.
It's all good.
There was okay. David C was talking about your run in Thunderbolts. Like you've had 2 runs in Thunderbolts.
Yes,
right.
Thunderbolts was my first Marvel monthly title.
Yeah,
I did back in, I want to say 2015,
mm-hmm.
and then I did another Thunderbolts miniseries last year. I was hoping it was going to be an ongoing, but no such luck.
Yeah.
So I did the 2015 one. That was right around Secret Empire was whirling up, and that was my first chance to write in the Marvel universe in the regular continuity. I'd done some other Marvel writing, but it was like the Figment miniseries for the Disney Kingdoms line, and I'd done some of these kind of ad comics for Marvel and things like that. But Thunderbolts was my first chance to really kind of flex and go, okay, I love the continuity and I love superheroes and I love team dynamics. That was what really came across in that book. It was a lot of fun. And then, but that was about the original Thunderbolts team, only now the Winter Soldier was their leader, and he was trying to sort of redeem them in his own kind of way. And then honestly, the second chance to write Thunderbolts wasn't originally necessarily going to be a Thunderbolts book. Zdarsky was finishing Devil's Reign, and they were like, we want a book to spring out of that, preferably a team book. And you love doing team stuff, and we like your team stuff. What do you think could work for that? And so I was talking to the editor, and we were going back and forth about the team dynamics and what had happened during the event. And I was like, I would love to do something with Hawkeye. He would try and pull together. He's feeling out of sorts after Matt Rosenberg did this series called Free Fall with Hawkeye. That's like Hawkeye in a brutal, brutal place. And I was like, what if Hawkeye tries to climb out of that pit? What if he tries to put the West Coast Avengers back together? And then the idea came, no, he doesn't put the West Coast Avengers back together. He fails at putting the West Coast Avengers back together. He gets this other team. And I said, well, he was leader of the Thunderbolts for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And so was Luke Cage. And now Luke Cage is mayor of New York. The Thunderbolts are Kingpin's sort of enforcers. That's what he called his enforcers during his run as mayor, where they would like execute his will and break laws and cause all these problems under the auspice of, I'm doing this for the government. And so I thought, well, I think both Luke Cage and Clint would want to redeem the name. They would want to redeem the name Thunderbolts. So they're going to put together a new Thunderbolts team. And so that was what I pitched back over to CB Cebulski. I said, let's do Hawkeye putting together a new Thunderbolts team. And it's going to have this real heart on its sleeve kind of feel, almost like Avengers by way of Ted Lasso. Like Clint's not the right guy for the job, but he's got to do the job. And he's got to do a job that's going to be really hard to do. And it was a ton of fun to do. And it was a lot of joy.
Did you ever get to meet Grant Morrison?
I have. I met Grant once, really briefly at a DC Comics party. We didn't get to have any sort of extensive conversation or anything like that. I still have not been able to sit down with him. I've met a lot of the writers whose work, has blown my mind over the years. I had a wonderful conversation with Neil Gaiman many years ago. I've been able to meet, Kurt Busiek. I've chatted at length with and mm-hmm. all kinds of people. I got to meet Roy Thomas. That is a hell of a story, actually.
Tell me about that, and then we can go back to this.
Yeah. Have I gotten original deities and demigods? Boy, do I.
We had something going, Annex. We were about to hear about Roy Thomas.
So that's an original deities and demigods. That's the one with the Cthulhu mythos and everything in it. It's one of the early printings. Yep. Just sitting on my shelf over there. It's a beauty.
We mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, it's Robbie Hasbro. Okay, so let me tell you about me and Roy Thomas. So last convention I did before the pandemic, it's fall of 2019. I got an invitation to go to Paris, France, Paris Comic-Con, because they were launching the French edition of Rick and Morty versus D&D. And the publisher, they were amazing. These guys called High Comics. They were really, really nice. Mm-hmm. They brought us out. We booked some extra days on either end. So we got to do some touring around the city. We got to see all sorts of cool stuff. And then we do the show, and the entire allotment that they had at the show for the Rick and Morty D&D in French books sold out in like 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And so all of a sudden they thought they had enough books for the whole weekend, and everything sold out. So I have nothing to do. I have nothing to sign. They brought me out for the show, and they're like happy because they sold out of the books, but they're like calling their distributor and calling warehouses trying to get more copies sent in. And I got nothing to do. So I'm sort of killing time and wandering around the show. And I signed a few of my books in French over at the Panini booth, and then I had nothing to do. And Roy Thomas was one of the guests of honor at the Paris show.
Oh, cool.
And I've never had a chance to meet him. And at that time, I knew I was taking over Conan the Barbarian, the monthly at Marvel, but it hadn't been announced yet. It wouldn't be announced till January, and this was October. Okay. And so there's a huge line. Conan is really big in Europe. It's really big in South America. And on top of that, Roy, created the vision, and like he's been editor-in-chief of Marvel. He's written hundreds and hundreds of books. So he doesn't do a ton of shows. He had a lineup that was literally over a 2-hour wait. It was wrapping around the side of the convention center. And I was like, God, I really want to meet this guy, and I really don't want to wait in that line. And so I ended up contacting the guest rep for Paris Comic-Con, and I was like, I'm one of your guests. Is this possible? And they're like, oh, Jim, we'd love to help you. Yes, let's set this up. So the next day, they set up a thing where in between two of his signings, he had done a panel and he was coming back to do a signing, and he had like, I think half an hour, 45 minutes between. They were like, meet us in this one spot and we'll set up the introduction. It'd be our pleasure. And I got to meet him. I got to, shake his hand and started talking to him about Conan stuff. And I told him I had written some Conan, and he said, oh, what have you written? And I was like, oh, you wouldn't have read it, Mr. Thomas. This is, quite recent. And he goes, no, I'm coming back to do a new story, for Savage Sword of Conan. Mm-hmm. Mark, the editor, sent me everything, sent me a box with everything in it. I read it all. And I was starting to get nervous right there. And I go, well, I did this story called The Gambler. It was this 3-part. He goes, I read it. I liked it. And I was like, is this guy just saying that to be nice?
No, Roy Thomas doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't do that. And then he starts walking through the plot and telling me what aspects of it that he liked and the payoffs. So he read it, he remembered it, and he told me why he liked it. And I was
That's
getting like
amazing.
goosebumps. My mouth was going dry. I was so nervous. I was kind of freaking out because he was complimenting me on my story and that I did it right, that I was writing Conan well. And then I said, Mr. Thomas, I've got a bit of a secret. And he goes, oh, what's that? I said, I'm the new monthly writer of Conan the Barbarian. I'm taking over the series next year. And he looks at me and we have this pause, and then he slaps a hand on my shoulder and he goes, welcome to the fraternity.
Oh, man, that's beautiful.
It was like King Arthur just knighted me, man. It was like one of the best moments of my professional career. I came back to my table afterwards. My wife looks at me and she goes, are you high? Like I looked like I was on drugs. I was so giddy. She goes, you have the look on your face like you are beaming almost as much as you were at our wedding day. Like you are so happy right now. I was just like, you don't understand. You don't understand. Like Roy Thomas said I did good. He said I'm one of them. And she was like, you are out of your mind right now.
I love that.
It was good, man. It was very special. It was very special.
Oh my God, I love that story so much.
Yeah,
and Roy Thomas doesn't BS.
Apparently
that doesn't happen. And because he has an editor's mind. So
I know. So Ed Greenwood, the creator of the Forgotten Realms, he's become a friend, which is crazy to me. Ed sends me this really nice message. He goes, I was talking to Roy last week and he says you're doing a good job. And I was just like, holy crap.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. I love that.
Good.
I love that. Where the hell were we? Okay. That's a great story. That's such a good story. The Canadian creator must be asked the question, do you see
Alpha Flight as a true Canadian team? Well, of course they're a true Canadian team. I've written only one Alpha Flight story. I wrote they did a one-shot Alpha Flight True North, and I wrote the lead story in that. Max Dunbar drew it. He and I are long-term collaborators on stuff like D&D and things. But yeah, Alpha Flight's great. I've got some really cool ideas for Alpha Flight. Every so often I would lob them at Marvel, and they usually there you go. That comment, by the way, about the signature.
The signature, yeah.
So this is, believe it or not, this is by design. So I was taught very early on in my authorial career. I don't know how to explain it. Three pieces of advice about a signature. It sounds weird. My signature obviously is different from my legal signature.
Mm-hmm.
My full name's not Zub, by the way, either. It's Zubkovich, which is Ukrainian, which I don't want to write that on every book. That's brutal. But Zub is easy to remember, and it works really well. So three pieces of advice I got for signatures. So the first was, make sure that it's legible, because if you've got a book with 5 signatures on it and they all just look like random scribbles, how are you supposed to know which one's which, right? Then the other thing that someone recommended is they said, make sure you can do it with one sweep so you can do it quite quickly. You know what I mean? And then don't use your legal signature, because you don't want to give everyone the same like signature you put on contracts and, legal documents and stuff like that. So I've kind of honed that signature over the years, and I've got it down to a fine science now. And it feels weird now. Of course, I've written that way more than my legal signature. So when I do actually write on a document, I have to take a moment and kind of go, how do I sign stuff properly and like do the thing? So it's a different skill. Yeah. So thanks, David.
He appreciates it. And Edwin also has that Dungeons & Dragons.
Sweet, man. It's an absolute classic. I didn't have it originally. So I had a later printing. I think it's third printing when they don't have the Cthulhu mythos in there. But during the pandemic, I went on a bit of a collector blitz buying old D&D stuff, because
you and everybody else.
I think we were all trying to find retail therapy during the pandemic. And I got one of these babies, eBay bid for it, and I was like, have to do it. Do I have any interest in writing the X-Men? I was talking about this a few weeks ago. Not me writing the X-Men as in like I've got the gig, but how dangerous a job the X-Men is, how it's the hardest team book in comics. And the reason why is because the Fantastic Four is the family, and maybe you swap one character out or occasionally, or you whatever. Even the Avengers, you've got your mainstays and whatnot. The X-Men is constantly changing and constantly evolving, and Claremont built this phenomenal pedigree of constant change and evolution for the characters, and I love it. I reread all the Claremont X-Men right before I wrote Champions, because I wanted to remind myself what a damn good
That's a
monthly
lot of
serialized book.
reading.
But it was like, it was a joy because I remembered those stories. But it was like, how does he hang a subplot? Where does he pay things off? And how does he set up these emotional, because it was such a good soap opera. How does he set up the book? But it's also the hardest book in comics because the cast is gargantuan and everyone has their favorite era of the characters. And the natural inclination is to want to drag it back to the era that meant the most to you. But X-Men as a concept is constantly moving forward. And so you can't just haul it back to whatever 70s, 80s, 90s version you really loved, because then it doesn't feel like it's the ever moving forward kind of X-Men, which feels very intrinsic to when the book works well for me as a reader and and so it's that weird thing of, if someone gave me the opportunity to write X-Men, would I do it? Probably, because that's the kind of, life opportunity you want to have. That's the kind of creative opportunity you hope you don't screw up. But on the other hand, it's like the tainted chalice, because the fandom will never be happy. They will never ever. And I don't mean that in a cruel way.
I understand. I am the
They
fandom.
wanted to feel the book when they were reading it. Let me take this into terms of Conan. I can deliver to people, hopefully keep delivering to people, the feelings that they had reading Conan in the 70s and 80s, right? This feeling of bombastic adventure. And I can put a pike in the ground, and the majority of readers will either coalesce around whatever, Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith, or Roy Thomas and John Buscema, or Kurt Busiek and Carrie Nord. So if I can find, plus the original Robert E. Howard stories, if I can find something in that milieu and I can drive that with the artwork and we can drive that with the storytelling, people will be generally satisfied. I'm not saying that I'm the perfect Conan writer. I'm just saying I know how to put the pike down in the ground. But how do you put the pike down on X-Men? Which era is the right one? What's the right cast? How many of the obscure characters do you use versus the iconic characters? How do you continue to evolve those characters in exciting and unexpected ways that don't feel played out already? Like, Claremont evolving Storm as a character you look at from the 70s through the 80s and into the 90s is this phenomenal character story. And the reason why she feels stagnant now is because the best stuff that could ever happen to her feels like it's all been played out. And I don't blame any other writer not knowing what to do with that, because Wolverine or any of these characters, Colossus, like, it's an incredibly difficult task to pick up one of those characters and go, I'm going to shock you, surprise you, amaze you, keep you on the edge of your seat, and you've never seen this before with this character, and then do that with a cast of 8, 10, 12, 20 characters. Oh my God. Like, X-Men is in some ways an incredible opportunity. It's also the most dangerous roller coaster ride in all of comics. Like, it's like, get ready to get your head off,
It is difficult to please the fans, right? Especially long. Like,
and I'm not saying that to be mean. I want, obviously, readers.
No, you're not. But you're speaking the truth, because I am very much in that mentality. When House and Powers of X was coming out, that was the most interesting thing. Like, I was in the comic shop every week.
Right.
I was so on the edge of my seat.
But like almost
2 months later, I still wanted the X-Men back at the X-Mansion playing baseball.
Right. But almost every other book, like, I could put a pin in whatever, Daredevil or Spider-Man or Batman, and I could get a pretty good pike of like, here's measuring stick wise where I feel comfortable and where I think I could do something with the character, and the fans would feel like they were getting something they recognize, but hopefully with some new ingredients. X-Men's one of those ones where it was like, I would need to take a week and like find myself. Like, I would need to like marinate in it up to my neck, and then see if I could even envision where you take it from there. And I don't know if I would find it or not. I can't So I'm sure Lunar's just having this little small comment, and I've turned it into a 10-minute dissertation on the X-Men.
No,
but it's
because
true,
there's a
man.
lot of fact. It's really difficult. So I'm
And
not gonna
and
name
and
any
and
names, but there's some of my favorite writers of all
oh,
time
absolutely.
and written X-Men
Yeah,
and
and
have
sometimes it
failed
doesn't work.
and
Yeah,
have failed
and and and
because
and I don't feel like it's even their fault. I feel like it's
no.
the property itself is such a hard thing to pin down.
Mhm.
And even when, I mean, how hard is it? It's so hard. Even when you bring Chris Claremont back, it doesn't always work. Like that's how crazy it is. Like the lightning in the bottle feel of that era. And you bring the guy who did it back, and it still doesn't. The readers weren't happy there either. So you're like, how do you please? How not just please the fandom? How do you please yourself? How do you please editorial? How do you please? I feel like in some ways the Marvel Cinematic Universe has the same danger. How are they going to use the X-Men? How do you take this ludicrously complicated cast of characters
Where do
and
you
distill
start?
it down?
Yeah.
Where do you start? What is the most iconic? What is the most potent? They were able to do that
And still feel
incredibly
fresh.
well with the Avengers, right? Captain America
Mhm.
and Thor and Iron Man, because we'd never seen those characters on the silver screen done that way. And you can distill them down to these core concepts. How do you do that with this team? I don't know. It's an incredibly difficult prospect. I would be stupid to not try, but that would be one of those things where I'd probably have a long talk with my wife and be like, this is going to be one of the hardest periods of our life. Like this is going to be the most stressful, like crazy, get
I talked
ready.
I talked to Chip Zdarsky about writing Life Story,
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man Life Story, and I asked him, I was like, "What kind of research did you do?" And he
Sure.
said,
Read all of Amazing Spider-Man.
"That's exactly." And
Yeah,
Chip, right? Like he's a
I do. He's a
jokester.
friend
I'm
of
like,
mine. Yeah.
"No, you did not." And he was like, "Of course,
Yeah.
he's Canadian. Of course, you guys are friends, and you're both really
Yeah.
friendly." But so he was like, "No, I really did read
No,
every
he really
single
did.
issue." I
Yeah.
was like, "That is a hell of a task," and not a lot of people do that. A lot of
And
people,
and here's the difference. Reading for research is so much different from reading for fun, right? Like if
oh
you're
yeah,
reading for fun, you can just let it wash over you and kind of,
mhm.
get a rhythm and just keep reading. Like I reread all of Conan, all the Roy Thomas stuff and all of Savage Sword. And some of it is the best comics ever.
Oh yeah,
And there's some real clunkers in certain periods. and
yeah.
and so you're reading and you're trying to like look at it with a discerning eye and be like, is this genuinely good? I don't know anymore. Like I can see the forest for the trees. Like art wise, I can go, this looks really sweet. But story wise, sometimes you're like, is this derivative or am I just losing my mind? And then you've got
Well,
to
you
try
read
and
so
take your
much, and you're like, "I just
right.
read this," and you're
Right.
reading it
You're
like
like,
back to
how
back,
many
and you're like,
evil
"I know I read
wizards?
this." Like,
How many towers? Like, how many? Like, and you're like, okay, so I don't ever want to do these kinds of story beats because they've been done so many times. Like, I don't want to trip down this, but equally, which things feel like they're absolutely intrinsic. And if you don't have them in a Conan story, you would feel like you're missing something. That's the other crazy one.
oh right,
It's like finding those weird balancing points. And rereading the prose stories is really valuable to me because that strips away all the artifice, right? Like
Mhm.
Robert E. Howard's 21 original, short stories of Conan. You read those, and most of them you can read in one sitting, and they're pulpy, punchy. They're pulp. They're meant to just get in and entertain you right from the first paragraph. And so I'll read those and it like summons something very visceral, very core. And I go, right, it's like this, or this is how far we can push it. And this is how hard we can go. And then I'll, pick up my favorites again, or I'll look at some of these different things, or sometimes the ways that Roy Thomas or Kurt or obviously Robert E. Howard use language. Like the language of that series in the pulps is very different from a contemporary book. It's different from a contemporary comic. The type of captioning that we use, the way that we use captioning. Here's the thing: if you look through the original Conan comics, there are no sound effects. Roy Thomas says that when he was putting together the first issue, he
I never
realized that
thought
if you
about that.
just had clang, 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 and like that all the sword fighting was going to suck. And so he turned them into these poetic bits of captioning where they're describing the clash of steel or the smell of blood or like these visceral sensory bits of information that can enhance, and almost like everything is in slow motion. We are spending more time on those battle panels. We're spending more time thinking about the visceral information that's washing over us. And so the fights feel more epic, even though we are kind of removed from them, narratively speaking. And so trying to channel that without making it sound derivative or saying the same kind of stuff over and over again. How many times can you talk about someone's mighty thews, or, you know, the bone and sinew and all these kinds of things, and where do you use it and how do you use it? It's a difficult prospect, but it's a challenge that I'm really relishing. And when I'm able to use that language and it feels like I've tapped into something very core to the character, it feels really special. I'll give you a weird example. There's I'm going to talk about someone else's podcast. That's weird. So there's a podcast called the Cromcast, and they specialize in pulp, especially Robert E. Howard and Conan stuff. And I've done a couple interviews with them. And there's an interview I just did that's going to be on, I don't know, a couple weeks. It's going to be on their site. And one of the dudes, he always reads passages from the stories that they've been reading, and he reads it in a big dramatic voice. And if you feel this pulpiness, and we did an interview and we were talking about Bound in Blackstone, the new Conan trade, and he read a passage of my narration in that voice, like it's Robert E. Howard stuff. And it really worked. And I don't want to brag, but it was like that moment of, oh damn, like we tapped into something pretty cool there, you know, like that is the dream, you know, that you're really doing it, that it feels alchemical, that when Richard Starking says, you know, you're really doing it, you're channeling the Robert E. Howard, or when your editor isn't just giving you notes, but sending you these excited exclamations of like, I read this page and I got, you know, goosebumps, and I'm just like, damn, like, cool. That's a fun feeling. That's the way it should be, you know?
So yes, you would write X-Men.
Was that the most rambling?
I love it. Dude, I'm the same way.
Yeah. Would write X-Men. Yes. Check box. And the guy listening to this on the stream is like, just say yes or no, man. Just say yes or no. It's a simple question. You want to write X-Men?
He got so much more wisdom out of everything.
Children of the Atom or no? Make a choice, buddy.
Lovecraft wrote a story, then passed it to Robert E. Howard. It's weird reading horror of the universe to the best fight known to exist.
Yeah, they were pen pals, actually. So they sent each other letters, Lovecraft and Howard, and they would have these extensive conversations about all kinds of things, about history, about life, about their upbringings and stuff like this. And one of the things that's really interesting is that, you know, in a Lovecraft story, the universe is doomed either way.
Oh, right. Yes. Every single story.
In a Lovecraft story, you'll go mad and you'll become a gibbering, you know, drooling mess. And in a Howard story, you'll fight to the death. You know what I mean? That's the difference. It's still going to be tragic. It's just whether or not you go down fighting. That's the difference between the two. How do you spell that podcast name? So it's Crom, like the god, like Conan's god. C-R-O-M.
Look at that, cast. James. Thank you. James.
There you go. A weird fiction podcast. Perfect. And what's funny about Chromecast as well is that when you type it into Google, it usually puts up Chromecast because it thinks you've done a spelling mistake. So you have to go, no, I really want the Chromecast. And they've done hundreds of episodes about all sorts of different pulp stories. My new interview, I don't know when it's going to be up, but I did one with them earlier, like last year. I think similar timing as Lexington, like we were talking about the build up and Free Comic Book Day and all sorts of stuff.
Dude, I am so happy for you. I am so happy.
Thank you. It's been such a cool ride.
It is one of those things that it's a property that people love, and it is honestly, it's kind of like X-Men, right? It's kind of like X-Men in the way that people love it so much.
But like any long-term
personal offense,
these are iconic characters. If you get to work on a Superman or a Wonder Woman or a Batman or Spider-Man or a Conan, these are characters that are pillars of pop culture, right? If I go out on the street and I ask someone the name of a fantasy character, Conan's gotta be one of the only ones that your average person knows, right? And that's thanks to, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie and stuff like that. But that character carries that kind of a cachet that I can be literally crossing the border and they say to me, you know, oh, where are you going? I'm going to a convention for professional things. Oh, what do you do? I write comic books. What do you write? And if I say Conan, there was a guy, you know, the border crossing guard gets excited and you're just like, that's wild, man. Like,
that's awesome.
You know, that's the kind of cachet that it carries. And I try never to take that stuff for granted, that I still have to tell the stories I want to tell. And obviously I'm a huge fan, so I'm going to tell the stories that I think are going to, you know, get your blood pumping and do it right. But on the other hand, you know, I've also got to like be aware of this broader kind of cultural footprint that it carries, and that when we do something and when we drive it forward, you know, hopefully we make something memorable and we're able to be a cool part of the legacy of this thing. And that legacy stretches deep behind us and hopefully, you know, continues ever onwards. And that's the way it should be, you know.
Okay, so let's just let's ask the hard question then. If you were given the chance to continue writing Conan,
yeah,
I mean, is this something that you would have to sit back and think about, like how long you could write it for?
I have I have an answer to that.
Okay.
And part of it is it's going to come across, I got to be careful how I word this, right?
It's okay.
So Roy Thomas has written more Conan than anyone else by a long shot.
Yes.
I talked to the reprint editor about this, and we were saying somewhere in the realm of like over 320 individual credits between Savage Sword, the monthly series, King, specials and annuals and mini series and all sorts of stuff. So no one's going to touch Roy, and that's the way it should be. He brought the character to comic publishing, and he's an absolute, you know, legend of the industry. And then after that is a guy named Michael Fleischer, who wrote the series after Roy. Wrote it in the late 80s, I think maybe the early 90s. Did a bunch of Savage Sword, did a bunch of
late 70s, early 80s.
I think he has, don't quote me on this, 54, 56 issues total.
That's the second longest running, huh?
Second longest run. Then after him is Tim Truman, who did it at Dark Horse for a long time, right? I think Truman's like 50 or 51 issues. So, but before I started on my run at Titan, I already had 27 issues of Conan in various respects.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay,
right. Now I'm on for another 24 minimum plus Savage Sword. So I'm already on the cusp. If I renew up for a third year, I could have the second most Conan issues. And I don't just want to get over it. I don't want Tim Truman to catch me. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay. That's what it comes down to. Okay.
I need to get some distance to get that number 2 spot with a bullet. So
okay,
that's an egotistical thing to say, but that is one of my little goals right now. It would be very nice to settle into that number 2 spot.
Dude, that would be awesome.
It would be a joy. And because it's one of my favorite things, it's not like this is an arduous ask. You know, this isn't some, oh no, I have to write more Conan. Oh no, you know, like it's the joy. It's one of the best, most creative times of my life right now. I feel so good. I feel so excited. And getting that reader response. I've had projects where I've worked really hard and I'm like, man, people are going to love this. And sometimes they do, but you know, sales don't always match. And
I was a big fan of Wayward.
Yeah, I love Wayward, but that's still a creator-owned book, and it was huge. We did 30 issues, which in creator-owned terms is a massive kind of run, 6 trade paperbacks and everything else. And I still get Wayward fans coming up, and I still get people discovering the series, and I'm super, super proud of it. But, you know, obviously when you work on Avengers, it's different. People have a different, you know, kind of...
Oh, right.
Yeah, they're bringing something. Dungeons and Dragons has 50 years this year. You know, it carries a legacy alongside of it. And I've got more creator-owned stuff planned. Like I told someone the other day, I said, I'd be stupid not to do a new creator-owned sword and sorcery book at some point, considering now I've got, you know, Conan and Dungeons and Dragons behind me since the last time I did a creator-owned fantasy book. So I am developing my own original stuff as well, and there's always cool kind of out of comics, you know, media conversations and things like that, but I'm also in one of the best spots I've ever been. I'm on a character and on a franchise that I love. The creative team's amazing, editorial is supportive and incredible. We've got a cool long-term plan, and the readers have given us as much energy as humanly possible to see it through. That's where you want to be, and I want to definitely see that to a very cool and exciting, you know, run.
So 100 issues.
Yeah, clearly that's got to be the goal.
You got it.
Got to do it. 3 digits, or we die in the sand. Yeah, that's right.
If you could take any artist with you, and I love you, I know you love your current artist. Was there a particular artist, like when you were going through the many issues, not just for research but also reading Conan?
Oh, back in the, I mean, who, Barry Windsor Smith hasn't drawn Conan in forever, and I don't think we'll ever come back to the character, and that's long well known. So it's not fair, but obviously, who wouldn't want to collaborate with the original Conan artist who cut his teeth and became the legend that we know him on that book? Like, if you look at Conan #1 and then you look at Conan #24, which is the last issue he does on the monthly, which is the Song of Red Sonja, the growth he has as an artist in those 2 years is unfriggin' believable. And then he just gets better. It's crazy, right? Like that's he did a series of 10 covers for Conan Saga when they did reprints. I think that's the last Conan art he ever did. And those full color covers are just, every single one of them's a banger,
Oh yeah, when they were reprinting the classic stuff. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
he did.
So that's an easy ask. It'll never happen, but that's the easiest ask, to say.
Okay, if you can't get Barry Windsor Smith, Frank Cho, that's a good.
Frank Cho would be phenomenal. McNiven's a friend of mine. I've talked to McNiven. McNiven also he's committed at Marvel for the foreseeable future.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, McNiven did that story in Conan, in King Conan. He did a phenomenal job. He did a sort of Windsor, kind of take.
Oh yeah, that's right. He did.
Yeah, it's absolutely
stunning. And it took me a minute to realize it was him whenever I was reading.
Yeah, because he aped that style perfectly. McNiven's amazing. He's a really good dude. Frank Cho's a phenomenal artist. He's got that golden age kind of pulp feel to it. He would be really cool. Trying to think of other artists. Alan Davis. I know he did a story in Savage Sword with Roy, but Alan Davis is one of the greatest artists living. His storytelling is absolute jaw dropper. I would love also to do, if it was going to be Savage Sword or something, because you wouldn't get him on a monthly book, but like a one-off, someone like an Arthur Adams or like, all kinds of stuff that.
He did some covers, right? Like he did some covers,
and that's the thing is that like, Paul Smith, he did X-Men in the 80s. He's got this beautiful, elegant, open line style. I don't think he's done a monthly book in a long time. I love his artwork so much. He was the artist on X-Men when I started reading X-Men, right?
Hey, me too. 168 was my first issue.
That's right. And so that to me, what were we talking about? The era of X-Men, whatever era you're in.
I still would, if I were writing X-Men, I'd take him back to the Outback. That was my favorite
era. It was a cool era, man. Sylvester, it was so good. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, so there are so many of these phenomenal artists. Obviously, Carrie is a friend, and Carrie's I would love to work with Carrie on something. Even just a one issue would be so cool. But the other thing Esad Ribic is phenomenal.
He did the Conan with Aaron, right? Like
sorry, who did?
Esad,
yeah. He did a few, and he did a one-off special. I think he wrote Andrew it as well.
I can't remember if he did King or not, but I remember him doing the original series.
But and Mahmoud Asrar is phenomenal and all this stuff. And there's something to be said, obviously, for getting those classics, Jeff Isherwood and all these guys who've done the book over the years.
Right.
But I think what's also as exciting is finding guys like Jonas Sharf who've never done it before.
That is true.
Like knock people out. Like, hey, you never seen this guy do Conan? Check this out, and just like really deliver something on that kind of a level. Obviously, I think there's, you want to keep people who have done it in the mix and all kinds of things like that. But I think it's really exciting when I go to a convention now and I go through Artist Alley. If I see someone who's phenomenal, I want them to do a variant cover. I want them to do a future Savage Sword story. I want to, bring them into the fold. And
you put that bug in their ear, you're like, hey, maybe you should submit something.
That's the thing that's so fun about it right now, is that we want to kind of go in both directions. We want to obviously honor the past and bring these people back into the mix. Working with Joe Jusko, for crying out loud, is an absolute honor.
Awesome.
Right? Yeah. But on the other hand, you're like, I want, Nick Marikovich, who did Dead Romans, he did a cover for, Savage Sword. and it looks amazing. And you're like, there's a guy you've never seen. You know, he's a relatively modern artist, recent artist. Now he's done a cover for the new Savage Sword of Conan. Like it's a cool piece for his portfolio, and it's a great piece for us, and shows you the kind of flexibility. You know, there's a bunch of European artists. I was in Wales back in May, and, you know, a whole bunch of cool artists who were there. I would love to see, you know, put them in contact with people and check this stuff out. They've got the classic sensibilities and the right kind of art, and just so many cool possibilities. That's what's fun about this right now, is that we've got our staple, you know, kind of pillared artists here on the monthly book. And then Savage Sword is that showcase where we can get kind of funky. So, yeah.
I like that. It's because it's an anthology, right? Like, you guys are taking it old school. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's different writers and different artists, right? Doing
like
the Savage Sword. Different eras of the character too. Sometimes young, sometimes old. Oh, Bill Sienkiewicz, man. I've been trying. I want a Bill Sienkiewicz cover.
Even
real
that
bad.
awesome Conan cover.
Yeah,
What if?
and Walt Simonson's the king too, man. Like, I absolutely love. I would love Walt to do a cover.
That's something about Conan. So it was the first time I had read Conan when Marvel started coming out with those omnibus editions. What got me into it was, I still got it back here, is the Conan by Busiek, that Colossal Conan.
Killer.
And when they were releasing those at Dark Horse in 2003, and I was like, oh man, I'm hooked. And I was upset when they lost the license. Marvel got it. I'm like, oh cool, they're gonna continue. Oh my gosh. And they're releasing the original stuff in the original coloring. No offense to the Jim Zub coloring at Udon Studios. Dark Horse Comics.
That Chronicles of Conan, they very specifically wanted us to take at the time, a modern coloring approach.
That's what was hot at the time.
That's what was hot. Dude, let's render all the water and all the shiny armor and all that stuff. That was of the time. That was what everyone wanted.
But that was the first time I had read it. Like, I didn't read it as a kid. It was a line that when I was, I was more than X-Men, and Conan was just, I would see it at the stores. But going back and reading them, I had no idea how, like, there was some old Mark Silvestri. They even misspelled his name in some of those issues.
In Savage Sword, the pinups were like a who's who of who's going to be the hot artist in 5 years. It was like it was a showcase. It was a
absolutely, and that was my point. Is now Titan has a chance with Conan to do that again for all these artists that are, trying to make it out into putting their stuff out there.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, when Jonas and I went out for dinner at New York, and we were talking about the event and all sorts of cool stuff we're planning, and I was just getting them pumped, like talking to him about the possibilities, and really him getting to put his stamp and do what he does well. And we're going to give him the biggest platform possible to put these pulp characters out into this cool space and make it look epic and awesome. And then with the plot style, where I was like, I'm going to give you as many big blowout action moments and big set pieces. You show people, what you're capable of. I want this to be an absolute showpiece for you. That my job is to create excitement, both for my creative team and for the readership. And if we're pumped, you're going to see that every single, every issue. You're going to be excited. You're going to feel that electricity across the page. Yeah.
That's a hell of a pitch. That's awesome. Here, let's get one more question, because we're going on the 2-hour mark. And
I know
Jim has been amazing, and I know he's got more Conan to write.
I do have emails piling in. I actually just glanced down at my inbox, and it says 18 new emails. So it's I'm sure it's fine.
Okay, we'll take just two more questions.
All good.
And then we'll wrap it up. This has been a blast, and I want you to come back.
What collected editions does Titan have planned for Conan?
Well, let's stick to yours, like your line.
Yeah.
Right?
So I know that they've already advertised that they're doing reprints of the older stuff, but I have no idea what the schedule is on those or the omnibuses. The trades, we're going to be collecting each of my Conan, runs, arcs in trade paperbacks, and then I hope obviously after that they're doing hardcovers, but I have no idea in terms of the scheduling on that. I've spoken to them about taking all my old Conan stuff from Dark Horse and Marvel and maybe doing an omnibus or doing some sort of a collected one. That would be fun.
What was that name again? What kind of book was that?
An omnibus. I would love to see.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, never heard of them. But that's just my kind of pipe dream. If that sounds like the kind of thing you guys want to see, if you want to have like a pre-Titan kind of Jim Zub, so like all the stuff that I did, on Conan before this, that would be fun. I would love to have that on my shelf. So feel free to ping Conan.com, and let them know that you want to see that, because that would be a ton of fun. I want one of those on my shelf.
Okay,
When I'm at a show, when I see Dan Slott signing the giant Spider-Man hardcovers, and I'm like, damn, I want a book thick enough to kill a child if I drop it off a 3rd-story landing. I want one of those.
That's the dream. That's the dream, right?
Yeah.
All right. This is from my buddy Gus Bus, who's big into board games. I just saw a video where a friend of yours is teaching a board game. What is your favorite game right now? Sorry, it's not comics related.
No, don't worry about it. I'm a big tabletop gamer. I love board games like crazy. So there's a bunch of games I'm playing lately. Right now, by the way, hey, this is thematic. The Conan board game is running their new Kickstarter for the Red Nails expansion. So if you haven't played the Conan board game, came out in 2016. It's awesome. It's genuinely awesome. And I liked it before I started writing Conan, I swear. It's skirmish-based miniature combat. It's all kinds of cool missions. And if you haven't played the game before, they've got a tier where you can get the base set and get the game. Anyways, there's my little advertising for Monolith. They're doing really cool stuff. But the board game I'm currently obsessed with, my buddy Mike lent me a copy of Thunder Road Vendetta, which is this like Mad Max style board game where you've got post-apocalyptic vehicles racing and smashing into each other and shooting at each other while you're driving down a road full of traps and holes and ramps and stupidity. It is the term that they use in these board games is Ameritrash, which is you're going to roll a lot of dice and it's going to be a lot of chaos and you don't get to be highly strategic. But you know what? It's a hell of a lot of fun. And so I thoroughly enjoy the Thunder Road game. So I've actually got people coming over probably Thursday night. Someone's bringing dinner and we're going to play Thunder Road with 5 players. And someone just popped the link into the James. You are hot on the links tonight. This is good stuff.
He's our oracle. That guy is quick.
But yeah, it's the Conan board game's great. Thunder Road's great. There's this company called Oink Games. They are a Japanese board game company, and they specialize in board games that are in very tiny boxes. They make the most elegantly designed little games, little games, but they're not small in terms of strategy and stuff. Because they're so small, I can throw a couple of them in my luggage when I'm traveling. And so I can be out with friends or in another country. And I'm like, hey, do you want a party game for 10 people? It's in a thing the size of a card box. They are one of the coolest little game companies. I think they're amazing. So, yeah.
Boink, oink.
Oink, like a pig sound. Yeah.
Got it. Really enjoy the chat, Jim and Omar. Please come back for a visit anytime.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
The enemies.
That's right.
Do you play video games too? How he doesn't have time. There's no.
Do I have time? My wife is obsessed with Baldur's Gate 3 right now, so she's almost finished. She's in Act 3. I finished playing it a while back, and I did it for research because I wrote a prequel comic. Wrote a prequel comic called Mindbreaker, D&D Mindbreaker, that was a prequel to the video game. But it was a joy. I absolutely love the turn-based strategy stuff. And of course, I love the original Baldur's Gate because I wrote the comics that take place in Baldur's Gate. So
that's research. I mean, you had to. That's a tax write-off. You had to go and buy the game and download.
And Guz here is right. Scout is a great little card game. If you pick it up, it's super fun. And it's easy enough you could teach like your parents, but it's also like deeply well put together. Yeah.
I'm gonna grab the Wakanda Omni.
Very cool. Thanks, man. That's very
a hell of a compliment because that second trade never came out. That's only like the whole series is only available.
And you've done your research, almost like collected editions or something. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that Wakanda. It's right here. That's the one right there. Yeah. That's so this is okay. This is my little flex. Are you ready?
Yeah. Show me. What do you got?
This bookshelf. This vertical bookshelf.
Yeah, I'm gonna highlight you.
Those are all my books. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 shelves of them.
Oh, that's wonderful, dude.
Yeah, it's the weirdest feeling.
Is it weird to look at a shelf and be like, I wrote?
Well, it's not just. I mean, it's an entire bookcase. I guess it's not just a shelf. It's a book.
Yeah, you're right.
Of just my books. Yeah.
What's the original art on the right or on your?
That is Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons. So that's a splash page of the Tomb of Horrors with Rick about to step through the I think it's the Mouth of Oblivion or something. My buddy Troy Little drew the hell out of that series. So I've got 3 pages from Rick and Morty versus D&D here on the wall. In my hallway, I've got probably 30 pieces of original page art. And then in my living room, I have a Conan painting. I have an oil painting by Eric Gist, the cover to issue 13 of my Marvel run. Yeah, I have a lot of original art here at the house. So
love it. Well, next time you come on, you'll have to show me a little bit of
yeah,
that original art.
man. We'll have to do a tour.
When you shared your images of your books on Reddit.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Someone was doing shelfies. That's what they call them instead of selfies, where you're showing off all your book collection. And I did the ultimate flex where I'm like, here's shelfies of just my books.
My work. That's awesome, dude.
It was a bit egotistical, but it was a joy. So, do I have a favorite Conan arc?
All right, I promise we'll end it with that because I've taken.
Sure, I'll end it on this one. Savage Sword has probably the best adaptations of the original Robert E. Howard stories. So whether it's the Windsor Smith Red Nails or the John Buscema and Alcala art on Tower of the Elephant, Beyond the Black River, and like those black and whites are so stunning and so beautiful. The Black Colossus, which is weird because like Black Colossus I like it. It's a pretty good story, but it's not one of my favorites of the prose. But then the Buscema adaptation of it is so stunning that it like jumps up in terms of my tier list, I guess you'd call it. Absolute favorite. So yeah, those are huge influence, and you see that in the writing that we're doing and the influence it has on, I think, on the new Conan series, but not in a way where we're just trying to ape that. We need to do original stories. We need to do our own thing, and we're not doing adaptations of the Robert E. Howard stuff. Not straight, one-to-one, because that's been done already so well. And I can't do better than Barry Windsor Smith, man. Like I can't do better than Roy Thomas. So what I've got to do is I've got to tell stories that feel like they fit within that milieu, or they fit between those amazing canon stories, and then bring new pieces into it. We've got a really cool idea. Nothing's been discussed yet publicly about our fourth story arc, but we're using the fuel of one of the original Robert E. Howard stories as the inspiration for this. It's not a sequel, but it's like broadening the scope of something that was hinted at in that story. And so that's the closest that we're coming to adaptation, where that story is kind of wrapped up in this bigger idea that we've got, and we're going to sort of expand the scope of it and show you even more. And even then I feel like feels like grabbing lightning, because it's so, people know those stories so well.
Now, when you say the fourth story arc, who will be maybe, well, I don't know how far you are. Who would be the artist?
Oh, it's already being drawn, so we're good to go. So that's Doug again. So we've got, Rob Torrey did arc 1. Mm-hmm. Doug Braithwaite did arc 2. Rob's back for arc 3. Doug's doing arc 4. Yeah.
Awesome. So you have a rotating artist.
Yes,
I love
that's
that.
What's so cool about it. And then Jonas Scharf here on the event. So I've got 3 of the best damn artists in the business. I could not be more blessed on that front. Yeah.
Awesome. I can't wait to see this. I can't wait for that trade paperback.
Thank you.
Hopefully Titan will send me an early advanced copy so I can do an overview on the channel.
That would be awesome, man. Yeah. So February 13th. If you guys haven't already, please check out the new Conan series. We're incredibly proud of it. Monthly from Titan. The new trade paperback, Bound in Blackstone, collects our first 4 issues plus free comic book day number 0. That comes out February 13th. Savage Sword of Conan, I believe, is end of February. Make sure that you've got that on your pull list. It's going to be an absolute banger. And free comic book day in May is Conan Battle of the Black Stone number 0. And it is going to elevate things to a whole other level. So good times are coming in the Hyborian age. Sweet, man. And if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, jimzub.com. So on my website, I've got tutorials, how I write comics, a bunch of free tips and tricks and stuff in there. I have a newsletter where I cover what I've got going on. I'll even post up recipes and stuff like that. I posted up some of my grandma's Ukrainian recipes in my newsletter. I've got previews of things. I've got little analysis and discussion of the work that I'm doing on what we call the Zub stack. And so you can sign up for that and keep track of my stuff. So yeah, it's good times.
Awesome. Dude, it has been a blast getting to talk to you.
Absolute pleasure.
I would love to keep talking to you, but I know that you got to write. And my
wife I got to catch up on these 23 emails. All right.
Jim, it's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. We'll do it again.
Check out jimzub.com and check out Conan when it drops, if you haven't yet, on February 13th.